Chapter 28. After an early dinner, Poplar Fruit went out with Kiki in his arms. Although the afterglow of the evening had faded, the summer heat was still steaming on the asphalt path in the residential area. The pedestrians on the road were faint. It was time for families to sit at the table and enjoy a sweet dinner. Even the cicadas that had been clamoring all day stopped to rest. They took a taxi to the large children's store from last time. As soon as they entered, the cool air hit them in the face. The lights in the store were bright, and the temperature of the air conditioner was moderate. It made people feel comfortable walking in, but it was not too cold and irritating to the skin. The new receptionist at the front desk smiled and nodded at Poplar Fruit, who was carrying Kiki. The service was still so warm. Poplar Fruit found a receptionist in the shopping area and asked her what he should buy to reduce the swelling and mosquito repellent on Kiki's red packet. "Sir, the baby floral water and baby golden water are very good. You can sprinkle a little for a few hours, and no mosquitoes will dare to come close," the receptionist said with a smile. "Baby golden water?" Yonggwa thought for a moment and said with a smile, "Is it the golden water baby in the TV series that says, 'Bathe, bathe, 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 the golden water baby'?" "Yes, that's it." The receptionist saw Poplar Fruit humming the brainwashing commercial song and couldn't help but laugh. "Is this really that good?" Poplar Fruit picked up a bottle of baby golden water and asked doubtfully. "Yes, baby golden water can prevent mosquitoes, and it can also relieve itchiness. Moreover, this product is made of Chinese herbs, so it has a better mosquito repellent effect. It doesn't contain any irritating ingredients, and it's easy to volatilize. It's not like the cooling oil, which can easily be touched by the baby's eyes or mouth. It can better protect your baby's skin," the receptionist explained. "Then how do I use this? Do I pour a little in when I shower?" Poplar Fruit glanced at the introduction. It was similar to what the receptionist said. He hoped that it really had such a good effect. "Your baby should be less than a year old, right?" The receptionist looked at Kiki and asked. Poplar Fruit nudged Kiki and said with a smile, "It hasn't even been a month." "Then you can pour about half a bottle cap into the bathwater before bathing her. Just bathe her like you usually do. She won't have to worry about being bitten by mosquitoes for 3 to 4 hours after the bath. You can also rub some baby golden water on the areas that aren't covered by clothes. If she is bitten by a mosquito or has heat rash, you can also apply some for her. But because your baby is too young, you have to dilute it before it turns 1 year old. You probably have to put 1 or 2 drops of baby golden water on it, then dilute it with half a bottle of water," the waiter patiently explained to Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit felt that it was not bad, so he took a bottle and put it in the shopping cart. He would try it first. If the effect was good, he would buy it after using it. Pushing the cart to the place where mosquito nets were sold, Poplar Fruit once again felt that human intelligence was really amazing. How could they think of so many tricks? Poplar Fruit's own mosquito net was the most common kind. The 4 corners of the net were hung on the bed frame, and he could put them away when he wasn't using them. The mosquito nets in front of him were rectangular in shape, inverted semicircular in shape like a Mongolian yurt, and arched in shape. There were steel frames that could be folded like a tent, balloons that could be filled when used, and bamboo strips. There were dozens of different mosquito nets, and none of them were the same. Poplar Fruit immediately took a fancy to a mosquito net that was buckled like a pot lid in the baby's crib. He looked at the description and saw that the steel frame could be folded like an umbrella. But when he saw this, Poplar Fruit frowned. It could be folded like an umbrella. What if Kiki was sleeping, and its buckle wasn't fastened properly, and it suddenly popped open? Then the spring folded the steel frame and scratched or pricked Kiki. Shaking his head, Poplar Fruit looked at other mosquito nets. Safety first. After searching for a while, he finally saw a beautiful and safe mosquito net. The frame of this mosquito net was a combination of a floor-to-ceiling and a clamp. The floor-to-ceiling part was a square metal plate to ensure that the center of gravity of the frame wouldn't shift and become unstable. In the middle of the frame, there was an adjustable anti-slip clamp that could be clamped to the guardrail of the crib. This way, the frame of the mosquito net and the crib were connected as a whole. The mosquito net at the top of the frame was in the shape of a round embroidered flower. When it was spread down, it felt like a palace veil. "This is for my little princess," Poplar Fruit praised in his heart. Picking a mosquito net with yellow lace that matched the crib color at home, Poplar Fruit asked the waiter to help pack it up. The mosquito net and the frame that hadn't been assembled yet were placed in a long box. It weighed more than 20 kilograms. After paying the bill, Poplar Fruit picked it up and left. His relaxed look stunned the waiter. Now that he had increased his strength, he didn't feel tired carrying Kiki in one hand and things in the other. Walking out of the door, Poplar Fruit thought for a while. It was inconvenient to take the subway or bus like this, so he might as well take a taxi. So he walked to the side of the street and waited for the taxi to arrive. The road was full of traffic. The sound of horns, the sound of engines, and the noise of pedestrians intertwined into a majestic symphony. The flashing of the red street lights, the fleeting of the car lights, and the bright lights of the high-rise buildings made people feel the bustling and noisy city. Poplar Fruit felt a movement in his trouser pocket. He didn't know who was calling. Now that both of his hands were busy, what should he do? Fortunately, Poplar Fruit was strong. Using the middle finger, ring finger, and little finger of his left hand, he barely hooked the strap. Then with the other two fingers, he took out the phone from his trouser pocket. He swiped the lock screen, lifted it up, and clamped it between his neck and shoulder. The call went through. It was that bastard Song Ji-wen. He really knew how to pick the time to call. "Hey, old fruit, where are you now? Why is it so noisy?" "Just now, a car roared by on the road. I'm outside buying things for Kiki. What do you want?" Poplar Fruit said loudly. "Not now. I'll come to find you after work tomorrow. I'll tell you then." "Okay, I'm not free now. Let's talk tomorrow." The phone hung up. Poplar Fruit was about to take the phone off his neck when suddenly, a horn sounded beside him. Beep. The horn was screaming, and the sound was getting closer and closer. Poplar Fruit's heart skipped a beat, and he subconsciously took 2 steps back. Just as he stepped aside, a motorcycle roared past Poplar Fruit. A man with yellow hair on the motorcycle turned his head and cursed. "Motherfucker! Do you know how to watch the road? This was the sidewalk. How dare you break the traffic rules and shout like that?" Poplar Fruit was furious, but the motorcycle was already far away. Soon, he could only see its blood-red tail lights. Poplar Fruit frowned. Now that he was holding Kiki, even if he was angry, he could only let it go. "Fuck. My phone." Poplar Fruit just reacted. Just now when he moved back, his neck and shoulder loosened, and the phone rolled to the ground. "Where's the phone?" The ground was empty, and there was only a sewer opening. "No way. It fell in?" Poplar Fruit's eyelids twitched, and he squatted down to take a look. Although the sewer opening was sealed with steel, the gap in the middle was still big enough for a phone to slip through. Poplar Fruit couldn't see anything, and only heard the sound of water flowing. It was gone just like that? Not to mention whether it was possible to fish out the phone in such a turbulent current. Even if it was possible, it would have been damaged by the water. Poplar Fruit punched the tree next to him with his left fist. Under the heavy punch, the tree swayed slightly. Ignoring the pain, Poplar Fruit's heart was full of regret. This phone meant a lot to him. This was the iPhone 4 that Lu Yunran bought for him with her first month's salary after she started working. It replaced the Nokia that Poplar Fruit had used for 4 years. It was the most precious gift that Poplar Fruit had ever received. This precious didn't refer to its price, but the heavy heart. After Lu Yunran left, this phone became Poplar Fruit's last emotional sustenance. Looking at it, he would think of their sweet past. Sometimes at night, Yang Guo would secretly flip through the photos in the album. She would look at the time when the two of them were holding hands tightly, at the time when their faces were pressed tightly together, at the time when they hugged each other and walked on the road. Lu Yunran was gone, but she still filled Yang Guo's heart to the brim. "Now even you have to leave me?" Poplar Fruit stared blankly at the dark sewer. Poplar Fruit sat in a taxi in a daze. When he got home, he hugged the sleeping Kiki and sat on the bed. His heart was empty. Lu Yunran's beautiful figure seemed to appear in the night sky before his eyes, but she only looked back once before gradually disappearing into the distance. Just like the love between them, It was already so ethereal that it could no longer be grasped. Buzz buzz. The sound of mosquitoes flapping their wings pierced through the void and entered Poplar Fruit's ears. Mosquitoes again. Poplar Fruit woke up from his daze, and his eyes glowed again. He chased away a few and killed a few. But now, Kiki was like a piece of meat that attracted mosquitoes one after another. He had to set up a mosquito net for Kiki. Poplar Fruit first followed the waiter's instructions. He diluted a little baby gold water and applied it on Kiki's exposed little arms and legs. Then, he carried her to lie on his bed and set up the mosquito net. After doing all this, Poplar Fruit crawled out and opened the box of the baby mosquito net. It's quite simple, Poplar Fruit muttered to himself as he looked at the instruction manual. He assembled a few sections of steel pipes and metal plates and propped them up against the crib. Then, he fastened the anti-slip clamp to the crib's guardrail and tightened the screws. Finally, he hung the mosquito net from the steel ring above. The yellow embroidered mosquito net draped down like a waterfall and enveloped the entire crib. Poplar Fruit clapped his hands in satisfaction. It was done. He carried Kiki into the crib and poked his head out to observe. After making sure that there were no mosquitoes hiding in the net, he retracted his head from the mosquito net. Chi-Chi could finally have a good night's sleep. Poplar Fruit was relieved. At this time, he was also secretly laughing at himself for not being able to see through her and not letting go. Since she had already left, it was better for him to live his life well. Why think so much? Back in the living room, Poplar Fruit turned on his computer and logged on to the Shinda Translation Company's website. A new message flashed in the background of the interpreter. He opened it and saw that he had passed the gold medal interpreter test. Yes, Poplar Fruit slapped the table happily. Poplar Fruit opened the gold medal interpreter's background and looked through it. Although the mission panel was not as dazzling as the trainee interpreters, there were still a lot of missions. Many of the missions were clearly priced above the minimum standard of 300 yuan per 1,000 words. Of course, these missions also had time limits or other requirements. Poplar Fruit planned to find a mission with fewer words to try and see if the reward could really be transferred to his card in time after completing the mission. Oh, that's right, it's not in my card. Poplar Fruit remembered that this system was developed in cooperation with Alibaba and used the Alipay system. Poplar Fruit's phone was the one that had just fallen into the sewer. Scratching his head, Poplar Fruit opened the Alipay website and changed the phone. For the time being, he would set it to the number that he used to work. He would change it back when he got his card back. Poplar Fruit took out the phone from the drawer. This phone that no one would pick up if it was thrown on the street, used to call clients. He did not expect it to be used in an emergency. He smiled bitterly and shook his head. The night was getting darker and darker. Many people had already climbed into bed and gone to sleep. Poplar Fruit started his first job, since he resigned under the pale yellow light of the table lamp. The living room was completely silent. Only the sound of tapping on the keyboard could be heard. It was never too late to earn money for milk powder, right? Chapter 29. Early in the morning, Poplar Fruit jumped out of bed like a carp. Although he did not set the alarm, the good habits he had developed these days had become a natural reaction of his body. He woke up at the first glimmer of dawn. Last night, he stayed up until 1 o'clock in the morning and fed Kiki milk before going to bed. This morning, he could still wake up at 5 o'clock full of energy. This showed the wonders of Zhang Somfeng's internal martial arts. As usual, he ran practice martial arts and bought breakfast to eat at home. This kind of single life was a bit boring, but it was healthier and more leisurely than most people. Humming a little tune, Poplar Fruit made the milk powder. He carried Kiki to the balcony and looked at the scenery outside while feeding her. Poplar Fruit had a flash of inspiration. Should he play some classical music or children's songs for Kiki? He heard that it was good for the baby's brain development and for future early education. Ding dong. This was not the sound of the doorbell. Poplar Fruit's house did not have a doorbell at all. This was the sound of his phone's message notification. It had been a long time since he last used it. Poplar Fruit also thought for a while before he reacted. He picked up his phone from the coffee table and looked. There was money in his Alipay account. There was an extra 700 yuan. Yesterday, he translated more than 2,500 words. After deducting the commission, this was the amount. Looking at the time, it was a little over 9 o'clock. If he went to work at 8 o'clock, it seemed that Shinda Translation Company's efficiency was quite high. Poplar Fruit nodded with satisfaction. He did not know that Shinda Translation Company's bounty was usually settled within 2 working days. The reason why Poplar Fruit could get it so quickly was because of his translation yesterday. The speed and quality of his translation once again proved his ability. When Yao Dehua arrived at the company today and heard Wu Ping's report, he was very happy. He specially instructed the finance department to treat Poplar Fruit specially. Otherwise, he might not have received the money today. The remuneration for translation work was calculated based on the interest rate of remuneration for services. Although the personal income tax exemption had not yet been raised to 3,500 yuan, which would be officially implemented in September, Poplar Fruit's income had not yet reached 2,000 yuan, so he did not need to pay tax for the time being. Of course, based on Poplar Fruit's efficiency, his monthly income would definitely exceed the tax exemption limit. At that time, the Shinda Translation Company would automatically deduct the tax from his bounty. These were all stated in the electronic contract. Finally, there was an income. Poplar Fruit was overjoyed. Since his resignation, he had been under a lot of pressure. Whether it was Song Jiwen, his godmother, Lu Gillen and his wife, they all felt that Poplar Fruit's choice was too reckless. No one was optimistic about him. Moreover, he and Kiki had spent a lot of money these days. This money was deducted from their previous savings. How could he not feel anxious when he saw that his savings were slowly decreasing? Hard work paid off. After a period of learning, he finally became a gold medal translator. He also finally received his first bucket of gold after his resignation. Although it was only 700 yuan, Poplar Fruit was very confident that he could let everyone see that his choice was correct. Not only could he earn money, but he could also earn more than before. After feeding Kiki, Poplar Fruit let her sit in the baby stroller. Kissing her milky little face, Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Kiki, accompany Daddy to work, okay?" The baby stroller was parked on the right side of Poplar Fruit. Kiki could see her father, and Poplar Fruit could also look after her from time to time. Opening the webpage, Poplar Fruit saw that the mission he completed yesterday had passed the review. He smiled, closed the historical mission, and clicked on the mission market interface. It seemed to be a little different. Poplar Fruit was a little surprised to see that the missions in the first few rows had become high-price missions with a time limit. Could it be that there was a revision today? Poplar Fruit could not figure it out, so he stopped thinking about it. Anyway, it was just a change in the order of the missions, and it did not affect anything. However, Yonggwa didn't choose a mission like yesterday. She didn't choose a mission with fewer words and the lowest price. Since Shinda Translation Company was so generous with the rewards, then he would just do the missions in the first row. These missions with 1,000 words cost more than 300 yuan. If Poplar Fruit wanted to earn money, these missions were the most suitable for him. The time limit for other translators would increase the difficulty, but for Poplar Fruit, it was just a piece of cake. This was because his translation speed was very fast. Others needed to flip through the dictionary to find information, but Poplar Fruit only needed to take a look to understand what it meant. How could it not be fast? The first mission was a technical company that urgently needed to translate a manual. It was probably going to participate in some exhibition. Poplar Fruit used to work in a trading company, so he knew the ropes. 5,000 words, and a huge price of 3,000 yuan. This was 600 yuan for 1,000 words. It was a full flip. But when the mission was issued, no one dared to accept it, because the 5,000 words were required to be submitted by 10 o'clock tonight. No one thought that they could complete a 5,000 words Chinese translation in just 10 hours. Yao Dehua was also scratching his head in the translation department. His 3 top translators were sitting in front of him. Should he split the 5,000 words and let the 3 of them work on it? Yao Dehua was a little hesitant. This was a helpless move to complete the mission on time, but it would also cause the entire translation to read in different styles. "Boss, A secretary knocked on the door and came in saying, "The Eagle Hero has accepted the mission." Although this sounded a little funny, it was like a shot of adrenaline, making Yao Dehua feel refreshed. Wu Ping's rushed in front of him and said excitedly, "Boss, that's great. If it's the Eagle Hero, then this mission will definitely be a success." Yao Dehua also nodded excitedly. In his hand, he was still holding Poplar Fruit's report from yesterday. More than 2,500 words in 4 hours. Poplar Fruit also hesitated for a while before accepting the mission. It would be a pig's head if he didn't take the money. It's fine if it's hard work, but translating this 5,000 words manual can earn him 3,000 yuan. How many days of hard work did he have to work to earn that amount? It's time to work. Poplar Fruit turned off the speaker and looked at Kiki. She didn't protest. She just sat quietly in the baby stroller and looked at her father. Opening the document, it was the same old routine. Poplar Fruit slowly read the manual. It took him 15 minutes to memorize the 5,000 words. Then, he scanned it again to make sure that his memory was correct. Poplar Fruit closed the document. Then, he closed his eyes and began to draft the translation in his mind. Every time he flipped through 1,000 words, he would open his eyes and type out the translation on a blank document. Every time Poplar Fruit's fingers flew on the keyboard, and the rhythmic tapping sound rang out, Kiki raised her head in surprise. Her big eyes sparkled as she stared at her father. With her small brain, she couldn't understand what her father was doing. After an hour, Kiki couldn't bear it anymore and fell into a deep sleep. Poplar Fruit finished typing the 1,000th word, looked back and smiled. He put down the keyboard, stood up, and bent down to pick up Kiki. After all, it was a little uncomfortable to sleep sitting in the stroller. Poplar Fruit carried her into the room, put her on the baby bed, covered her with a quilt, put down a mosquito net, and checked that the baby monitor was working properly. Then, he returned to the living room and continued to work. At noon, Song Jiwen ran over. He was here to deliver the household register to Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit took out the household register from the information bag. The dark red cover was flipped open. The first page was the household owner, Poplar Fruit's information. The second page was Kiki's information. The name was Yang Luoqi. The right column indicated that the household owner, or the relationship with the household owner, was a daughter. Haha, Song Jiwen laughed. Now you can rest assured. Your daughter is officially under your name. Poplar Fruit smiled happily. Oh right, Lao Gua. Why is your phone always turned off? Song Jiwen shook his phone and asked. I couldn't get through today. Oh, I accidentally dropped my phone in the sewer yesterday. You can call my number 139x for now. I'll buy a new phone and get my old number back, Poplar Fruit said without looking up. You're so unlucky? Then hurry up and get it back. Otherwise, if my godmother calls you, you won't be able to answer. Song Jiwen said casually. Ah. Poplar Fruit raised his head in confusion and asked. My mom called me. Why do you care about this? Song Jiwen realized that he had spilled the beans. He stammered. No, I just said it casually. He was the worst at lying. Poplar Fruit could tell at a glance. Poplar Fruit frowned, stared at his eyes and asked. No, you're lying. Wait, you didn't tell my mom about Kiki, did you? Oh. Song Jiwen couldn't make up an excuse. He closed his eyes and said, My mom asked me to call her. You called me yesterday to tell me about this? Poplar Fruit asked. Yes. Song Jiwen nodded and said, I wanted to tell you yesterday, but my mom forced me to call her early this morning. My mom knows. Poplar Fruit felt that his head was a little big. He wasn't mentally prepared. Song Jiwen secretly looked at Poplar Fruit's expression. He didn't look angry. He said tentatively, My mom said that if you don't dare to say it, then we'll say it for you. You don't have to be so hesitant. Actually, I think my mom is right. A mother doesn't despise her son for being poor, and a son doesn't despise his mother for being ugly. No matter how hard it is for you now, my godmother can understand you. Also think about it. Kiki is going to be 1 month old in a few days. How nice would it be for the whole family to gather together and live such a happy life for her? I know. Poplar Fruit rubbed his face with both hands and said, Since you said it, then say it. Anyway, I have to face it. I'll buy a mobile phone, and get a new card in the afternoon. Do you have enough money? Song Jiwen took out his wallet and said, If not, I still have some here. Poplar Fruit looked at Song Jiwen strangely. He was moved and said, I have money. Do you still think that I don't have any income now? You don't have to pretend. We're brothers after all. You don't dare to spend my money. Poplar Fruit stood up and walked to the computer. He opened the Alipay page and waved to Song Jiwen saying, Come and see. He pointed to his morning income and said, See? This is the money I earned last night. So much in one night, Song Jiwen said in surprise. You didn't go to work in Guan City, did you? Poplar Fruit punched him and said with a smile, I won't go even if you go. This is the payment for translating. I've told you before. Look at this. Poplar Fruit opened the document that he was going to translate today and said, After you finish reading these 5,000 words, you'll get 3,000 yuan. This is too difficult. Song Jiwen looked at the document, as if he was reading a book from heaven. Now you know how good I am. You were afraid that I didn't have money, haha. Poplar Fruit laughed. Well, I was worried for nothing. Then you work hard. Come on. I won't bother you anymore. I'll go back to work. Song Jiwen was relieved and left. Poplar Fruit had lunch, walked around, then sat back in front of the chair, and continued to work. He had read 2,000 words in 3 hours in the morning. It would take him another 4 or 5 hours to finish the work. Chapter 30. It was almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Poplar Fruit raised his head to look at the time. Including the time he spent changing Kiki's diaper, he had translated another 2,000 words in the past 3 hours. He still had 1,000 words to go before he finished reading the entire book. No way. There wasn't enough time in the afternoon. Poplar Fruit knew that when Kiki woke up, he would have to give her a bath and massage. It would take a lot of time. Moreover, the Unicom business hall next to the market would close at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. If he didn't go now, he would have to wait until tomorrow. Since he wouldn't be able to finish reading the book in the afternoon, he might as well continue at night. Poplar Fruit picked up his wallet and ID card, locked the door, and walked towards the market. The business hall wasn't big, mainly because it wasn't a comprehensive business district. There were only a few residential areas nearby, and it was also a bit remote. Even if it was built big, there wouldn't be many customers. As soon as Yanggua entered the door, she saw a few women gathered together in the business hall. She didn't know what they were talking about. Looking at their high spirits and beaming with joy, it seemed that they couldn't get rid of the word gossip. Seeing that there was a customer, a slightly older woman coughed twice. She was probably the manager. Hearing the coughing sound, the women quickly straightened up and hid the smiles on their faces. Their expressions changed so quickly that it could be seen how powerful the women's talent in acting was. Although these salespeople liked to be lazy, their service attitude towards Poplar Fruit was still very good. A young salesperson with a pretty face tidied her clothes and greeted him. Sir, how can I help you? The young salesperson's cheeks were slightly red. While speaking, her eyes secretly glanced at Poplar Fruit's face. However, she didn't dare to look into Poplar Fruit's eyes. Is there something on my face? Poplar Fruit was a bit uncomfortable under her gaze. He reached out and touched it. It's quite clean. She's probably so careful because I found out that she was lazy. Poplar Fruit thought. It's like this. I lost my phone yesterday. It wasn't stolen. It fell into the sewer and couldn't be retrieved. So I want to replace my SIM card, said Poplar Fruit. That's not a problem, sir. What's your phone number? The young salesperson asked eloquently. Poplar Fruit read his phone number to her. Then, the young salesperson asked for his ID card. Poplar Fruit took it out of his wallet and handed it over. Sir, please provide me with 4 numbers that you have dialed or received recently. After operating the computer for a while, the young salesman took out a pen and a piece of paper and pushed them in front of Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit thought for a while and filled in 4 phone numbers. This was too easy for him. He could even recite the phone numbers in his phone. After he finished writing, Poplar Fruit noticed that the other salespeople next to him were looking at him and whispering to each other. He felt very strange and puzzled. Okay, sir. Please pay 10 yuan as a service fee, said the young salesperson with a smile. After taking out 10 yuan and handing it over, Poplar Fruit quickly took the SIM card from the young salesperson's hand. He removed the back of his backup phone and replaced it with a new SIM card. As soon as he turned on the phone, several text messages came in. The ding-dong sound was endless. Poplar Fruit smiled awkwardly at the young salesperson. Her face turned even redder. After applying for the SIM card, Poplar Fruit walked out of the store. However, he could vaguely hear the excited voices of the women in the store. "He's so tall and handsome. Didn't you notice that his skin is super good? Yes, yes, yes. Xiao Xiao, you look too smitten. Hold it in. Haha." This group of women, he had just left and they couldn't wait to gossip again. Poplar Fruit shook his head and walked to the market. There were still some vegetables at home that he bought in the morning. After buying a piece of pork and a few fresh eggs, Poplar Fruit went home. He couldn't stay outside for too long. Kiki could wake up at any time. When he got home, Poplar Fruit first called his mother. There were more than 10 missed calls from his mother today. If he didn't call back, he didn't know how anxious his mother would be. "Hello, Fruit, is that you?" As soon as the call connected, Poplar Fruit didn't have time to speak before his mother's familiar voice came through the phone. His mother sounded very anxious, but her tone was full of concern. When Poplar Fruit heard his mother's voice, he suddenly felt a lump in his throat. "Yes, Mom, it's me. You child, such a big thing happened. Why didn't you tell your family?" "Mom, I wanted to give you a surprise," Poplar Fruit said hesitantly. "It would be strange if you were surprised. Mom raised you, so how could I not know your personality? You like to hide everything." Okay, it's all my fault. Don't be angry." Poplar Fruit apologized and carefully coaxed. "I heard from your godmother that it's a daughter. What's going on? You need to make it clear to me. Why did you suddenly bring back a daughter at such a young age?" Poplar Fruit had to briefly explain Wu Yu's matter again. "Is it your daughter? We have good intentions, but we can't be fooled by others. Why do I feel that it's a bit strange?" Poplar Fruit's mother asked worriedly. Wah. Wah. Kiki's cries came from the room. Kiki woke up. Poplar Fruit quickly said, "Mom, wait." Kiki woke up. "I'll go take a look first." The phone didn't hang up. Poplar Fruit opened the door and held the phone in his left hand. He carried Kiki with his 2 hands and then hugged her with his right hand. After a few coaxing words, Kiki stopped crying. "It's my daughter, Mom. Don't worry. I've done a paternity test. It's 100% your granddaughter. But Mom, I'm telling you, no matter what you say, I'm going to raise Kiki." Poplar Fruit frowned and said, "Look at what you're saying. Didn't I remind you? She's your own flesh and blood. Do you think Mom has the heart to give her away? Our young family is a little poor, but we still have integrity. We have to be responsible for what we do. We can't shirk." "Okay, I know. Mom, you're the best." Poplar Fruit smiled. Kiki's long eyelashes were stained with a little dew from crying, but she didn't care. It seemed that she was more interested in the phone in Poplar Fruit's left hand. She stretched out her right hand and couldn't reach it. She anxiously hummed. Hearing Kiki's voice, Poplar Fruit's mother's tone became lighter. "Fruit, is the baby calling?" "Yes." "Kiki, say hello to Grandma," Poplar Fruit said to Kiki with a smile. But Kiki didn't understand and continued to call. "Baby, don't mind him. Grandma will come to see you tomorrow." Poplar Fruit's mother laughed happily on the phone. "Ah." Poplar Fruit was surprised. "Mom, you're coming tomorrow?" "Yes, I've asked your sister to buy a ticket for me. It's tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. I'll probably arrive in the afternoon." "Mom, why didn't you discuss it with me?" Poplar Fruit said anxiously. "How could I discuss it with you? I called you and you didn't answer. But why did you suddenly come here? Aren't you going to help your sister take care of Xiaojia?" If Poplar Fruit had a third hand, he would cover his head and sigh. "I'm worried that you don't know how to take care of the baby. Let's not talk about it. It's a waste of phone money." "Mom, wait a minute. Which station are you getting off tomorrow? I'll pick you up." "Pick me up? Do you have a car?" "Haha, you don't have to worry about it. My godson will pick me up. You just wait at home." After that, Poplar Fruit's mother hung up the phone. God, he didn't know anything. They had already arranged everything. Songju and this guy. Poplar Fruit wanted to call him and scold him, But he raised his phone and put it down. Forget it. Let it be. The sooner it's settled, the sooner it's over. Poplar Fruit gave Kiki a nice bath and gave her a massage. After the bath, Kiki was still very excited. She sat in the baby stroller and twisted around, trying to attract her father's attention. Poplar Fruit didn't pay attention to her. He didn't even eat, and continued to translate his manual. Mom is coming. I have to show my best side in front of them, and earn more money. I have to make them feel that I can live a good life. Poplar Fruit devoted himself to the translation of the remaining 1,000 words. This time, it took him less than an hour. Poplar Fruit spent another half an hour to read his translation twice. He corrected a few small mistakes. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he sent it back to Shinda Translation Company. Looking at the time, it was not even 6 o'clock yet. Poplar Fruit was still very satisfied with the completion of the task 4 hours earlier. He didn't know that his completion of the task would shock Yao Dehua, Wu Pings, and the others who were working overtime in the company. He was now busy preparing milk for Kiki. Her father ignored her for more than an hour. This made Kiki very angry. She pouted and stared at him, refusing to open her mouth. How could a child who wasn't even a month old have such rich expressions? Poplar Fruit didn't raise other children. He didn't know that Kiki was outstanding. Instead, he had a headache now. The pacifier was already at her mouth, but Kiki still refused to let go. Poplar Fruit could only sing nursery rhymes for her. He racked his brains to recall the nursery rhymes he learned when he was young. I found a penny on the side of the road. I handed it to the policeman uncle. Goodbye, uncle. Goodbye, uncle. No, change it. Little rabbit, be good. Open the door. Open it quickly. I want to come in. I won't open it. I won't open it. Mommy hasn't come back yet. I won't open it no matter who comes. No, change it. A little girl picking mushrooms, carrying a big bamboo basket. Poplar Fruit forgot the lyrics. At this time, Kiki's eyes began to show a little smile. There's hope. Sing another one. Twinkle, 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 the sky is full of little stars hanging in the sky. They are like many little eyes. Poplar Fruit shook his head. His eyes followed the rhythm and blinked at Kiki. Hee. Kiki was finally amused. She didn't know if it was because of her father's singing or his expression. Her pouted mouth loosened and she laughed happily. Seeing that Kiki's face finally bloomed with a smile, Poplar Fruit was also very happy. He wasn't as happy as he was now when he earned more than 700 yuan this morning. It was said that a daughter was a father's happy fruit. This was absolutely true. After feeding Kiki, Poplar Fruit cooked some egg and pork noodles for himself. Kiki went to sleep again. Poplar Fruit took a shower and washed his clothes. He walked out of the bathroom with a frown. 2 hours had passed, and there was still no message on his phone. They didn't give him the reward. Did they already get off work? After logging into the translator platform, Poplar Fruit saw that the task he accepted today had passed the review. Since it passed the review, why didn't they give him the reward? Poplar Fruit checked his phone's inbox. There was indeed no message. What's going on? Wait. Poplar Fruit suddenly remembered that he had changed his SIM card back this afternoon. Poplar Fruit opened the Alipay website and checked his balance. It was more than 3,500 yuan. After deducting the commission and taxes, the reward for this task had already been received. Poplar Fruit patted his head. He was really stupid. How could he receive a message when the SIM card was changed? Poplar Fruit changed the SIM card back again. He had earned more than 3,000 yuan in one day. Poplar Fruit now felt that he was amazing. Although not all tasks had such a high reward, even if it was the average price, he could earn at least 2,000 yuan a day. If he worked 20 days a month, he could earn 40,000 yuan. With a monthly salary of 40,000 yuan, his annual salary would be close to 500,000 yuan. How many university students who had graduated more than a year ago could earn as much as him? After a while, Poplar Fruit came out of his fantasy. Wiping the saliva from the corner of his mouth, he opened a new task. Poplar Fruit began to work hard again. If he wanted to earn more, he had to work more. Chapter 31. Click, click. Poplar Fruit moved the cursor to the confirm button and gently tapped the mouse in his hand. Done. Poplar Fruit stood up from the chair. and made himself a cup of bilyuakun with satisfaction. Due to the conditions, Poplar Fruit could only make tea in a big cup, but it didn't affect his mood to taste the tea. Walking to the edge of the balcony, Yanghua fondly stroked the pot of devil's ivy that he still carefully took care of even though it had changed. He blew on the cup of hot water, and the tea leaves that were curled up like hair snails gradually stopped their spiral dance and settled at the bottom, leaving only the bright green tea liquid. He took a sip, and the tea liquid rolled down his tongue into his throat. Then the fresh and sweet taste bloomed in his taste gland. Poplar Fruit leaned against the railing and looked into the distance. He felt that everything in Guangzhou was good, except the sky was too ugly. The clouds were like a rag that wiped the table, but didn't have time to clean it. It was gray and black. The sky above the city in the distance was gray as if it was shrouded in haze. The sunlight was blocked during this period, and the scattered halos were not as beautiful. Yanghua missed the sky of her hometown. There was no heavy pollution from heavy industry, and there wasn't too much car exhaust emissions. She could see the vast and boundless blue sky when she raised her head. Her mood must have been incomparably comfortable. Right now, Guangzhou, Shanghai, and Beijing were still desperately expanding. Even though many heavy industrial factories had moved to areas outside of the Pearl River Delta, more polluting enterprises were reborn every day, taking root in the big cities. They only wanted the big opportunities and benefits of the big cities. This situation was very similar to the capital of Yingjili in the early 20th century. He just didn't know if these three big cities would suffer the same fate as Fog City in the future. Now it seemed that the haze that was difficult to control was not far away. Poplar Fruit shook his head and stopped thinking. This was not something he could worry about. He took a sip of tea and returned to the living room. Ding dong. His phone beeped with a message notification. Poplar Fruit looked at it and smiled. Yesterday, he had worked until 2 in the morning before going to bed. Today, after breakfast, he translated until 1 in the morning. After nearly 10 hours of work, he translated more than 7,000 words. Finally, he received a reward of more than 3,000 yuan. This time, the task wasn't as urgent as yesterday's. Originally, it required him to finish reading it within 2 days, so the price wasn't that high. It was only 500 yuan per 1,000 words. However, Poplar Fruit only took half a day to complete this quest. The more he did, the sooner he could move on to the next mission. Poplar Fruit had already chosen the next mission. It was another urgent mission that had just been released today. The time limit for the mission was 1 week. The reason why a week was considered an urgent task was because the client had given him a document of 100,000 words. 100,000 words. Even though it was an English translation, it was still nearly 20,000 words per day. For ordinary translators, even if they didn't eat or drink, it was still very difficult to complete. In the past, Shinda Translation Company would either ask the client to extend the time limit for such a task, or split it into multiple tasks, and let multiple top translators complete it. But this time, it was a big client who was rich and imposing. He had already said that the time limit was limited and couldn't be extended. However, he also offered a high price, 800 yuan per 1,000 words. He also told Yao Dehua that if the translation was good, he would increase the price to 1,000 yuan per 1,000 words. The extra 200 yuan would go directly to the company, and there would be opportunities to continue working together in the future. Yao Dehua thought about it for a long time. If they really did it separately, it would definitely cause the translation to be mixed. In the past, there was no suitable candidate, but now it was different. They had the Condor Hero. The translation speed was fast, and the translation was top-notch. Such a translator was simply a gold medal among gold medals, a fighter among roosters. Therefore, Yao Dehua asked the translation department to send a task invitation to Poplar Fruit. He also told Poplar Fruit that if he did a good job, the extra 20,000 yuan would be his, and the company would only take a cut. Yao Dehua understood that the generous reward would attract brave men. The company did not lack this 20,000 yuan, but if they could retain this big customer through this mission, they would have a gold mine that could be mined endlessly in the future. Poplar Fruit agreed after much consideration. If it was a literary text, Poplar Fruit would never accept it. To complete the translation of 100,000 words in a week? What a joke. It should be done in a month. This time, it was the translation of a medical report. It was also a kind of technical text. Other than some difficult terms that needed to be checked in the dictionary, it was basically not very difficult. After accepting the task, Poplar Fruit was not in a hurry to start. A translation of 100,000 words was not something that could be done in a short period of time. Sharpening the axe would not delay the work of cutting wood. Before he started writing, he began to read the document. It had to be said that reading on the computer was much worse than reading on paper. But Poplar Fruit did not have a printer, so he could only read it. This document had more than 400 pages. Even Poplar Fruit could only read about 100 pages in an hour. Then, he felt his eyes were sore and had to stand up to rest. But at this time the phone rang. His mother had arrived. "This is where you live." Su Jinfeng pushed open the door. Poplar Fruit and Song Jiwen were behind her, carrying bags of various sizes. "Mom, you go in first. Look, we are carrying a bunch of things." Poplar Fruit laughed. Song Jiwen carried 2 bags and said breathlessly, "Yes, godmother. Let me go in and rest for a while. I am exhausted." Poplar Fruit turned around and smiled at him. "You can't sit in the office all day. Look at me. I am carrying twice as many things as you. And I am not panting like this." Song Jiwen shook his head. He did not have the strength to refute. After entering, Song Jiwen sat on the chair in front of the computer desk. He was sweating like rain. He was self-conscious and did not directly lie down on the sofa. Su Jinfeng could not wait and asked Poplar Fruit to bring her into the bedroom. The old lady was anxious to see her granddaughter. The two of them crouched by the crib. Poplar Fruit wanted to pull up the mosquito net to let his mother have a closer look, but the old lady held his hand, afraid that mosquitoes would take the opportunity to fly in. "Oh, Fruit, how did you give birth to such a cute baby? Look, this little face looks exactly the same as when you were a child." Although her voice was low, the old lady was so happy that she spoke incoherently. Poplar Fruit covered his mouth and laughed without saying a word. At this time Kiki's eyelids moved. It seemed that she was about to wake up. "Oh, was I too loud just now? I woke the baby up." Su Jinfeng was a little regretful. Poplar Fruit comforted her. "It's okay, Mom. She should wake up now." Chi-Chi's eyes had yet to open, and her vision was hazy. She opened her mouth, and a clear cry suddenly rang out. Poplar Fruit was not surprised. He quickly picked up Kiki from the crib, patted her back and softly comforted her. Su Jinfeng was shocked. She said, "This child, why is her voice so loud? It's terrible when she cries." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Mom, it's okay. Kiki is very obedient." In her father's arms, Kiki's crying gradually stopped. However, Poplar Fruit smelled a little bad on Kiki's body. She probably pooped. Thus, he busied himself with tidying up Chi-Chi. The old lady was guarding by the side. She was worried that Poplar Fruit was clumsy and could not change the diapers. However, Poplar Fruit's brisk and steady movements immediately made her look at him in a new light. Was this still her son? Poplar Fruit had never done anything that she did not worry about since he was young. However, why was this big boy in front of her, who was methodically changing diapers, and compared to the child in her impression, who could not even tie his shoelaces, like 2 completely different people? "Fruit, you've grown up." When the old lady said this, her tone revealed gratification and reluctance. Poplar Fruit smiled proudly. When he was changing diapers just now, he intentionally showed off his skills. Sure enough, he immediately reaped the results. The old lady took Kiki from Poplar Fruit's hands and observed her tenderly. Kiki was also very quiet, but her eyes were still fixed on Poplar Fruit. She did not behave differently when she was being held by Su Jinfeng, compared to when she was being held by Lu Suqin. Poplar Fruit asked Song Jiwen to pour himself a drink while busily organizing the things his mother brought. "Mom, it's not easy for you to come here. Why did you bring so many melons and fruits? They sell everything here. Don't you think they're heavy?" Poplar Fruit looked at the big and small bags of pumpkins and cucumbers, as well as the big bag of peanuts still stained with wet soil, and smiled bitterly. How can the ones bought from the market be better than those grown at home? I thought that you liked to eat them, so I brought them over. You really don't know how to be grateful. Jiwen, remember to bring some back later. The old lady said in a bad mood. Okay, godmother. I like the pumpkins you grew the most. Shredded and cooked pumpkin rice is the best. Song Jiwen said while drooling. Poplar Fruit smiled bitterly. He was afraid that his mother would be too tired to be grateful. He shook his head and did not say much. Hey, Fruit, stand up straight and let me see. The old lady suddenly called out. Mom, what's wrong? Not knowing what happened, Poplar Fruit inexplicably stood up straight. Hey Fruit, I haven't seen you for only a few months. How come you seem to have grown a lot taller? A mother knows her son best. Su Jinfeng immediately saw that her son was different. Godmother, if you didn't mention it, I really wouldn't have noticed. Song Jiwen eagerly walked over and said, Old Gua, take off your shoes and let's compare. Poplar Fruit took off his slippers, and so did Song Jiwen. The two of them stood face to face. Song Jiwen's right palm swept across the top of his head, and then touched Poplar Fruit's nose. Damn! Old Gua, when did you become half a head taller than me? Song Jiwen said in surprise. In the past, Song Jiwen was 1.75 meters tall, which was a little taller than Poplar Fruit. But now Poplar Fruit was actually half a head taller than him. Really? You actually grew taller? Poplar Fruit scratched his head. He guessed that it should be because of his recent cultivation, but he did not want to say it. Maybe it's because I've been exercising a little too much recently. I usually get up in the morning to exercise. Song Jiwen was a little depressed and said, You're probably 1.8 meters tall now. You're already a 23 or 24 years old demon. But you can still grow taller. Moreover, you're so tall. It's really unscientific. You're the old demon. Poplar Fruit smiled and gave him a punch. However, it was really amazing. Poplar Fruit had grown more than 6 centimeters in just a month. Moreover, it was at an age where a man's height almost stagnated. Cultivating this cultivation method did have a lot of benefits. For example, his skin was now much better. Although it was not as smooth as a girl's, it was not too far off. However, Poplar Fruit was a little worried. Growing taller was a good thing. But if he grew endlessly, it would not be good if he grew into a giant like Yao Ming. It shouldn't be. Poplar Fruit comforted himself in his heart. There was no ancient record that Zhang Sanfeng was a giant. Chapter 32. Song Jiwen went back after sitting for a while. Poplar Fruit packed a big bag of food for him. Anyway, Song Jiwen drove his father's car today. No matter how heavy it was, he could carry it back. Since his mother was here, there was no need for Poplar Fruit to cook. Although Su Jinfeng's cooking was not as good as Poplar Fruit's, her home-cooked dishes were very tasty. Poplar Fruit also had a good appetite. After dinner, the mother and son chatted in the living room. Fruit, are you going to continue like this? Poplar Fruit smiled and said, What do you mean by continue like this? Su Jinfeng sighed and said, I don't object to you raising your daughter, but I'm worried that you won't be able to find a wife in the future. Poplar Fruit had never told his family about Lu Yunran before, and there was no need to say it now. Poplar Fruit laughed heartily and said, Mom, there are so many women in the world. There must be one who doesn't care about Kiki's existence. What are you worried about? It's easy for you to say, but which woman is willing to be a stepmother as soon as she marries in? Do you want to marry a woman who has a family? Su Jinfeng asked. What's wrong with having a family? As long as she is willing to be good to Kiki, I will marry her. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth now. You will know in the future. Su Jinfeng shook her head and said, I heard that you have registered your daughter's household registration? Let me see. Poplar Fruit got up and went to the desk in the bedroom to take out the file containing the household registration. He took out the household registration and handed it to Su Jinfeng. Su Jinfeng flipped through the household registration and read, Yang Luoqi, this is a good name. Did you give her? Or did the child's poor mother give her the name? Of course it was your most talented son who gave her the name. Poplar Fruit laughed. Su Jinfeng wrinkled her nose and smiled. You're just praising yourself. Poplar Fruit asked, How's the situation at home? Xiao Jie is already 2 years old, right? If you come out, can Daddy bring him here alone? Poplar Fruit also had an elder sister named Yang Ping. She got married a few years ago and gave birth to a boy. Because the two of them had to work in the city, they left the child in the village with their grandparents. It's fine at home, but I don't dare to bring it out now. Your father is alone at home. It's not a big problem. Why don't you dare to bring it out? Poplar Fruit asked in confusion. Elder sister and brother-in-law had already gotten their marriage certificate. It was not as if they had cheated on each other. What was there to worry about? Su Jinfeng said. Don't you watch the news? Recently, there's an organization that abducts and sells children in Guangdong province. They don't cheat people with candy, but they openly rob people on the street. They directly snatch children from other people's arms, stuff them into a van and leave. Last month, there were several cases in our city. Now, the families with children in our city don't dare to bring them out. I'm just afraid that she'll be carried away on the streets. Such a big matter, and the police don't care. Poplar Fruit frowned and said. Who said they don't care? They're like gorillas. Today they're here, tomorrow they might run to another city. We can't catch them. Then you tell Dad to be careful. If he goes out on the street, pay attention to see if there are any strange people following him. Don't worry, we don't dare to come out now. It's safe to stay at home. Su Jinfeng laughed. It's not a good thing to stay at home. The child is bored. Poplar Fruit shook his head. Mom, you'd better go back early. I'm worried about Dad being alone at home. There's no hurry. This time, I originally planned to help you take care of the child. But looking at your situation, you're taking good care of her. I won't worry about it. I plan to leave after my granddaughter is 1 month old. Su Jinfeng waved her hand and said. Okay, then you can stay here for a few days. You can sleep in my bedroom. I'll sleep on the sofa in the living room. Poplar Fruit said. There's no need to change. I'll sleep on the sofa. Su Jinfeng said indifferently. No, with your body. It's not comfortable to sleep on the sofa. You should sleep on the bed. I'm young. It's okay to sleep on the sofa. Poplar Fruit changed a new quilt for her, and then took his quilt out. Why do you have to make it so troublesome? Su Jinfeng said. She was stubborn, but her heart was as sweet as honey. I'll move Kiki's bed out later. You don't have to worry at night. I'll take care of her. Poplar Fruit said. Just leave her in the room. It's not like I haven't taken care of children before. No, I have to work late at night anyway. Leave Kiki to me at night. You can sleep peacefully at night. During the day, you can help me take care of her. Poplar Fruit was worried that the old lady would have to get up several times at night. This was too troublesome. The old lady was a light sleeper. If she was woken up again, she wouldn't be able to sleep anymore. Su Jinfeng asked strangely. Didn't you say you quit? Why do you still have a job? I did quit my previous job, but now I'm helping others translate at home. Poplar Fruit saw that Su Jinfeng didn't understand and continued to explain. It's when others give me the documents they need to translate. I translate them from Chinese to English or English to Chinese. Su Jinfeng understood after this explanation, but she asked worriedly, if you do it at home, will others pay you? Poplar Fruit smiled and said, of course. Guess just today, how much did your son earn? Don't keep me in suspense. Your mother didn't go to university. My education level is not high. Su Jinfeng glared at him. Poplar Fruit opened the text message in his phone and handed it over. He said proudly, today your son earned 3,500 yuan. Yesterday he also earned 3,000 yuan. Su Jinfeng opened her mouth and said, so much? How many acres of land do I have to farm to earn that much? Poplar Fruit smiled and said, starting today, I took on a big job. If I do it well, I can earn 100,000 yen in a week. Hiss. Su Jinfeng sucked in a breath of cold air and said, 100,000 yen. Forget it, I won't say anything. You've grown up, so you have to grasp it well. Don't be cheated by others. The old lady washed up and went to bed early. Poplar Fruit tidied up and moved Kiki's crib to the living room. Because he was worried about the radiation from the computer, Poplar Fruit did not place the crib close to him. Instead, he moved it to the coffee table. After settling Kiki down, Poplar Fruit continued to look at the document that he needed to translate. A document filled with medical terms was like a rock that was hard to chew. Even if Poplar Fruit was a genius, he still felt dizzy after looking at it for 2 hours. He immediately stood up to adjust his thoughts. Poplar Fruit's way of looking at things was different from an ordinary person's way of looking at things. Poplar Fruit's way of looking at things was actually memorizing things. Memorizing 40 to 50,000 words in 2 hours was a huge amount of information. Humans were not computers, so it was naturally difficult for them to handle. He walked to the balcony and looked out at the night sky. In the distance, the neon lights of the high-rise buildings flickered, and the roads and viaducts that extended in all directions were brightly lit. Looking from afar, the bustling pedestrians gathered from every corner of the city that was not at night, forming a dark river that flowed in all directions. Poplar Fruit suddenly had a desire to listen to music. He took out his phone and wanted to play his favorite songs like before. However, when he took it out, he was stunned. This was no longer the same phone as before. The functional phone in front of him did not even have the ability to play music. After getting used to using Boss Chiao's smartphone, Poplar Fruit looked down on functional phones. It was too awkward to use. I might as well buy a new phone. It's not like I don't have money. After making up his mind, Poplar Fruit went back to the computer, opened the shopping website, and picked up the phone. Now that Nokia's Symbian operating system had gradually lost its former glory, Poplar Fruit felt that this old phone company was going downhill. Since that was the case, he was not willing to buy another sunset phone. Samsung was very powerful. Its flagship Android phones were very beautiful, but they were expensive and did not have high specs. China's HTC phones also looked good. Although the HTC operating system had just abandoned Microsoft's WM operating system and hooked up with Google, the HTC operating system is very optimized for Android, and its phone's exterior looks are all the rage for a while. However, Poplar Fruit had tried Android in the past and felt that it was not easy to use. Although it was an open-source operating system, and the interface could be customized, it was still not as good as Apple's. Although Poplar Fruit was not a loyal fan of Apple's mobile phone and iOS operating system, he admired Steve Jobs very much. This man had gone through ups and downs. From being forced out of the company he had founded to being invited back by 8 people. He had completed a mythical reversal. Then, under the leadership of Qiao Yifan, Apple had become the world's largest company by market value. Apple, which he had led, had almost changed the way people communicated, entertained, and lived in the early 21st century. Despite his great reputation, he was still a man with a strong will. That was not right. However, Qiao Yifan was seriously ill. After suffering from cancer, he had lost a lot of weight. Yet he still insisted on working. Supporting his products was also supporting Qiao Yifan. After thinking so much, Poplar Fruit could finally open Apple's official website with a clear conscience. He stared blankly at the large picture of the iPhone 4 on the homepage, and its advertising slogan, "Once again, change everything." It was said that looking back would be like a dream. Once again, would there be a miracle? Poplar Fruit stared at the screen and thought, or rather, sat there in a daze. Even if it was not the same one as before, would he still want to buy it? No, I'm just here to buy a phone. Poplar Fruit warned himself not to think too much. Indeed, even if he did not have those memories, Poplar Fruit would still choose the iPhone 4. Because it was simply too outstanding. The glass panel was black and clear, and the stainless steel frame was only 9 millimeters thick. 3 millimeters thick. And it weighed only 137 g. HD display technology and screen, superior processor performance, the camera technology that led all mobile phones, and Apple's system that had always been good for user experience. Poplar Fruit had fallen deeply in love with the iPhone 4 since Qiao Yifan had released it last year. Then let's buy it. Although it would cost 5,000 yuan, Poplar Fruit was not short of money now. After choosing the black 16GB iPhone 4, Poplar Fruit thought for a moment and picked out a beautiful speaker from the store. It could be played through the iPhone's Bluetooth or directly plugged into the speaker. Also, Apple's music playback had always been good. Poplar Fruit planned to use it to play some music for Kiki. When he placed the order, the official website asked if he wanted a free laser engraving service. Poplar Fruit thought about it and accepted. But what should he engrave? Poplar Fruit fell into deep thought. Poplar Fruit could not think of any good ideas. He shook his head. Forget it, why bother? He typed La Memoire in the input box and continued to place the order. He filled in the address, paid, and closed the web page. The mouse wheel gently scrolled and Poplar Fruit began the boring translation work again. Chapter 33. Suqin and the others are here. Standing at the entrance of the hotel, Su Jinfeng saw them from afar and happily said to Poplar Fruit. She had permed her hair today, wearing a peacock green top with a shawl, black slim trousers, and black high heels. She looked exactly like a trendy mother-in-law in the city. Compared to when she first arrived, wearing cheap cloth clothes and shoes, it was a complete change. 2 days ago, with his mother taking care of Kiki, Poplar Fruit was able to complete the translation of the 100,000 words medical document. Not only did he earn the 80,000 yuan reward, but he also received an additional 20,000 yuan bonus for the high-quality translation. Poplar Fruit, who earned the money, happily pulled his mother to go shopping. While Su Jinfeng rambled on about Poplar Fruit's extravagant spending, she also sweetly accepted the clothes and gifts that Poplar Fruit bought for her. In the end, Poplar Fruit also took his mother to a high-end hairdresser to have her hair permed, completing the transformation of a fashionable mother. Today was Kiki's 1-month birthday. The rest of the family were either at work or taking care of the children, so they didn't have time to come. Su Jinfeng wanted to let Poplar Fruit go back to his hometown and hold a 1-month celebration, but Poplar Fruit wasn't willing. Secondly, considering that he was an unmarried child, she could only drop the idea. Thus, she discussed with Lu Suqin that the two families would come to the hotel for a meal to celebrate. It was festive, but not too shabby or extravagant. Poplar Fruit had already booked the hotel and stood at the entrance with his mother, waiting for his godfather and godmother to arrive. Big sister Su, you dressed up so beautifully today. You look so much younger. As soon as Lu Suqin came up, she pulled Su Jinfeng's hand, and the two of them chatted amiably. You're too kind. I'm a big sister from the countryside. No matter how you look at me, I still look like a village girl. Su Jinfeng said modestly with a smile on her face like a blooming flower. You're too kind. Your clothes are too beautiful. It feels so comfortable to touch. Lu Suqin said. The two women complimented each other nonstop. All right, let's not block the entrance of the hotel. Let's talk inside. Song Chunfeng waved his hand and said loudly. Poplar Fruit led the way with Kiki in his arms. Song Jiwen followed beside him. Su Jinfeng and Lu Suqin were chatting happily in the middle. Song Chunfeng walked alone at the back. Pushing the door open, Poplar Fruit let them in. At this time, Lu Suqin took Kiki from Poplar Fruit's arms. The room was very luxurious, and the lowest cost was 1,999 yuan. However, today's star was Kiki. She was wearing a bright red baby tang suit that represented the festive season. This was also bought by Poplar Fruit the day before yesterday. The material was very delicate and soft. Just this one alone cost more than 500 yuan. Kiki was carried by several elders in turn. Poplar Fruit tactfully followed beside them. Therefore, Kiki was also very happy. Her big bright eyes looked at the people who were carrying her. Her little tongue was pressed against her lower lip, half in and half out. She was very happy. After playing for a while, the dishes were served. Poplar Fruit took Kiki and carried her in the baby stroller beside him. Through the adjustment, Kiki could see the table and everyone. They were not in a hurry to pick up the food. Everyone clinked glasses together to celebrate Kiki's first month of happiness, who was sitting in the baby stroller in a daze. When Kiki saw that everyone was suddenly looking at her, she was so happy that she waved her little hands, as if to express her gratitude and happiness. Poplar Fruit took out his phone and took a picture of her innocent and beautiful moment. Then, Poplar Fruit stood up and toasted several elders, thanking them for their care. The elders also encouraged Poplar Fruit, hoping that he would get better and better. Of course, rather than encouraging, it was more like teasing. They were taking this opportunity to urge Poplar Fruit to find a mother for Kiki, as soon as possible. Their witty words made Poplar Fruit not know whether to laugh or cry, and he kept retreating in defeat. After that, Song Jiwen, who had been complaining about his hunger, shouted, "Let's eat." Then, he was the first to reach out with his chopsticks and pick up a piece of white-cut chicken to eat. The smooth and tender white-cut chicken, the roast suckling pig that was just the right size, the juicy and delicious abalone, the white and tender prawns, the shiny green vegetables, the osmanthus fish, the stewed soup, and so on. This table was filled with typical Cantonese dishes. The culinary skills of the chef were much more exquisite and delicious than Poplar Fruit's. The scene of toasting on the table did not last long, because Su Jinfeng and Lu Suqin did not eat much, and Song Chunfang usually had a lot of social activities. He only ate a little. They happily carried Kiki to the sofa at the side to chat and play with the child. Song Jiwen and Poplar Fruit benefited from a table full of delicious dishes. Both of them had a big appetite, and the dishes were delicious. They ate until their mouths were full of oil, and they were very happy. Song Jiwen swallowed a piece of roast suckling pig, pushed Poplar Fruit's arm, and whispered, "Lao Gua." Poplar Fruit turned to look at him in confusion while eating. "I'm going to move out," Song Jiwen said. He had this idea for a long time. Although the house at home was big, he had been thinking about renting a house himself. "Have you thought about it?" Poplar Fruit asked. "Well, that's right." Song Jiwen looked up at Lu Suqin and whispered, "It's too inconvenient at home. Sometimes, I can't even bring my girlfriend home." Indeed, with his parents at home, it would be too strange to bring a woman home. Moreover, Song Jiwen was a playboy. He did not have a girlfriend with the intention of getting married at all. "Have you talked to Godmother?" Poplar Fruit asked. "Of course not. Why would I talk to you in such a low voice if I did?" Song Jiwen said. "Accompany me to look at a house next weekend. I plan to act first and report later. When the time comes, help me put in a good word." Poplar Fruit nodded and said, "Okay, no problem." He was not worried that Song Jiwen would not have the money to rent a house. This guy's monthly salary was close to 10,000 yuan, and the benefits of being a civil servant were good. Renting a house, even a good one, was like floating from the sky. It was not a problem. "What are you talking about?" Song Chunfang felt bored among the women, so he sat back at the big table and asked with a smile. "Nothing much. We just talked about work." Song Jiwen quickly made up a story. "You two are not in the same line of work. How can you talk about work?" Song Chunfang laughed. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Mosquito is telling me interesting things about his work." "You are playing at work," Song Chunfang criticized Song Jiwen. "Look at Poplar Fruit. He can earn 100,000 yuan at home." Poplar Fruit did not know whether to laugh or cry. Su Jinfeng must have told Lu Suqin the gossip. And then he became a typical example of educating the child. "I am different from Lao Gua. I am in politics. How can I be measured by how much money I earn?" Song Jiwen muttered, "I am not talking about money. I am talking about the line of work you have to love. You have to do things seriously and be down to earth." Song Chunfang used this opportunity to educate his son. Poplar Fruit looked at the side and found it funny. In fact, Song Jiwen was indeed a talent in politics. Don't be fooled by his usual sloppy appearance. When he came to work, it was as if he had changed into a different person. The way he did things was very reassuring. Moreover, he was slick and had a glib tongue. In just a year, he had become the favorite of his unit's supervisor. However, Song Jiwen's slickness was a little frivolous in Song Chunfang's eyes. Song Chunfang had been in politics for decades. He understood that if he really wanted to climb up, it was not enough to learn how to be slick. His own ability still had to keep up. In the end, it was not enough to know how to do things. The key was to be able to do things. Song Chunfang had always been supportive of Song Jiwen, hanging out with Poplar Fruit. It was also because he saw that Poplar Fruit dared to take on responsibilities and had a down-to-earth personality. After all, words could not compare to personal teaching. He hoped that Song Jiwen could be subtly influenced by Poplar Fruit and gradually become mature from immature. As they talked, the topic slowly shifted from Song Jiwen to Poplar Fruit. Song Chunfang turned his head and looked at Poplar Fruit. He asked pleasantly, "Poplar Fruit, do you have any plans for yourself now?" "What plans do I need? Being a translator is so profitable. Can't I just continue doing it?" Song Jiwen said. He picked up a piece of fish and put it in his mouth and chewed with relish. "Eat your food and don't interrupt. It's not good to stay where you are and not look forward. Poplar Fruit, although you are making a lot of money now, you have to understand that money is not everything in life. A person should have a goal to fight for. Do you have any ideas for your own future?" Song Chunfong asked. Poplar Fruit was just about to say that he wanted to raise Kiki well. Song Chunfong waved his hand to stop him. "Don't talk to me about children. Besides Kiki, do you have any long-term goals?" Poplar Fruit was stunned. He really had not thought about this question. This month, Kiki's existence made him almost forget the world outside his home. He was completely immersed in his warm and happy little home. He felt sad when Kiki cried, and happy when Kiki laughed. He even felt that Kiki was his whole world. If he had any wish, it would be that Kiki could grow up healthily and happily. Song Chunfong saw Poplar Fruit's confusion. It was exactly as he had guessed. He smiled and said, "You don't have to rush to answer me. Think about it yourself. Before you had Kiki, what did you wish for? What did you pursue in life? Then think about what you want to do now besides children. What else do you want to do? Life is so long. A person always has to have a career that he or she strives for in order to live a fulfilling life." Yes, Song Chuanfang's words enlightened Yanghua, and she finally came to a realization. Had he given too much of his heart and soul to Chi-Chi? Although he was willing to give up everything for Kiki, was it really a good thing for him and Kiki to lose himself completely? The answer was no. Poplar Fruit believed that if he and Kiki lived in a small enclosed space, where others could not enter, and he could not go out, he would definitely not be happy and happy. He had to have a career that he strived for and grow up with Kiki. This kind of growth was healthy and happy. This kind of life would be full of passion and fun. This kind of experience would be precious. Poplar Fruit used to be a person with great ambitions. He had once dreamed of being a knowledgeable and eclectic teacher. He wanted to be able to throw away his books and speak eloquently on the podium. The students below the podium would be intoxicated by his words, and they would also be in awe of him. He also dreamed of being a food traveler. He wanted to travel to the most beautiful and interesting places in the world, and eat the most delicious and unique delicacies in the world. But he was not as smart as he was now. When he was in college, he and Song Jiwen were at the bottom of the class. From time to time, they would fail a makeup exam. Poplar Fruit, who was hit hard, gradually became realistic. He gradually hid those unrealistic dreams deep in his heart. But it was different now. Poplar Fruit now suddenly realized that he had the foundation to realize his dreams. He had a photographic memory, a wise and farsighted mind, and a strong and sturdy body. The only thing he lacked was the determination to work hard for his dreams. Poplar Fruit suddenly understood that his desires had not faded because of the passage of time. On the contrary, they were now given a new meaning. Poplar Fruit hoped that on the road to his dreams, he could have Kiki's company and witness. So let's fight together. Chapter 34. Su Jinfeng returned home on the second day of Kiki's 1-month birthday. The old lady was also worried about the old man taking care of the child alone. Of course, to be exact, she was worried about the old man taking care of the child alone. Poplar Fruit's father was much worse than Poplar Fruit. The old man was 56 years old this year, and was good at farm work. However, in Su Jinfeng's words, he was an old man who didn't even know how to cook, let alone take care of a child. Therefore, when she saw that her son's life was orderly, Su Jinfeng was relieved and didn't stay any longer. After his mother returned home, Poplar Fruit and Kiki's life returned to normal. From now on, Yanghua would rarely accept super urgent quests that required 100,000 words per week. After all, those quests required a lot of time to complete. As Poplar Fruit, he worked tirelessly day and night. He translated for more than 10 hours a day, and even used his personal time. Now he only worked 6 hours a day and translated around 5,000 words. The unit price wasn't too high. Usually, it was 400 to 500 yuan per 1,000 words. However, he could save time to accompany Kiki and study. Kiki was 1 month old now, and he couldn't keep her at home all the time. Poplar Fruit would take her out for a walk every day. In the morning, after Poplar Fruit fed her milk, he would take her to the small park to enjoy the morning sun. After dinner, Poplar Fruit would take her to the pedestrian streets like Shangxiujiu or Beijing Road to see the bustling night scene of Yangcheng and go shopping. Poplar Fruit realized that Kiki especially liked to go outside. Whether it was looking at the flowers in the morning or the lights at night, she enjoyed it. Poplar Fruit now gave himself time to study other than work. The first language he learned was French. Although he learned it in university for a period of time, he just muddled through it. He didn't know who had told him that French was a romantic language, but he didn't think so at all. Just the conjugation of verbs was a pain in the neck. A few years had passed, and what he had learned at that time had been handed back to his teacher. Taking up his old French book again, Poplar Fruit memorized words at night and struggled to understand grammar. In the morning, he followed the tape and read the text. French is not easy to learn. First of all, its phonetic symbols were very magical. Its uvula sounds were easy to learn, a bit like the prelude to coughing. However, when some notes encountered different notes, they would produce different sounds. This was only the sound of a single note. If there was a special combination, there would be consecutive recitations or concatenations. Secondly, the verb changes. The person, singular, plural, and tense would cause the verb to change. Often, a verb could have more than 10 forms, which meant that there would be more than 10 different ways of writing and pronouncing. Moreover, their changes were not very regular. Flipping open the conjugation table at the back of the dictionary, there were more than 10 pages of different types of conjugation. Not only that, but it was also categorized as masculine. Therefore, even though the French dictionary was not as thick as the English dictionary, if all the conjugation was included, the English dictionary was really nothing. The tenses in French were also more complicated than the English. For example, the present tense in French was divided into the direct tense, the subjunctive tense, the imperative tense, and the conditional tense. The other grammatical forms were also unpredictable. If one did not put in a lot of effort, there was no way to understand them. For example, the way numbers were pronounced was completely different from the logic of Chinese and English. 60 and below 60 were still okay, but above 70, it became the magical 60 plus 10, 11, 12. Then someone asked, was 80 60 plus 20? No, 80 and 90 became 420 plus 1, 2, 11, 12. French is really much more difficult to learn than English. Even Poplar Fruit had to spend a lot of effort in the beginning to memorize the words and figure out the grammar thoroughly. There was still a long way to go before he could understand French news. Don't think that French news is easy. The recording of French texts is simply heaven and earth compared to it. It is as fast as a machine gun, and some French teachers may not be able to understand it. However, today, Poplar Fruit did not have the time to worry about learning French. When he was feeding Kiki at night, Poplar Fruit found that Kiki seemed to have teeth. Just as Poplar Fruit was about to pick up the empty milk bottle, in the gap between the pacifier and Kiki's mouth, Poplar Fruit seemed to catch a glimpse of a white tooth. As if he had discovered a new continent, Poplar Fruit was a little happy, but also a little in disbelief. Is it really a tooth? Poplar Fruit tried to put the pacifier close to Kiki's mouth, but Kiki, who was full, refused to open her mouth. Since even coaxing and lying could not convince Kiki, Poplar Fruit decided to try. Putting down the milk bottle and washing his right hand, Poplar Fruit placed Kiki horizontally on the sofa. He leaned over Kiki's face, his right thumb brushing across Kiki's upper lip and gently pressing on her lower lip. After drinking milk, Kiki's small red lips were still glistening with water. Poplar Fruit's right thumb slid in a little, pressed on Kiki's lower lip, and pried open her tightly closed mouth. As soon as Kiki opened her mouth, Poplar Fruit smelled a strong milk fragrance. But that was not important. He stared blankly at Kiki's gums under her chin. The originally bare gums now had a small white dot, just like a baby tooth that had just broken out of the skin. Poplar Fruit's right index finger reached in and gently touched the small white dot, which looked a little hard. Before he could pull out his index finger, Kiki's small tongue curled up, as if protesting against an intruder. Poplar Fruit's index finger felt a soft touch, and then a lot of saliva was smeared on it. Poplar Fruit did not know whether to laugh or cry as he pulled his right hand back and took a piece of tissue from the coffee table to wipe it. Kiki seemed to be very satisfied with her masterpiece just now, as she lay on the sofa and giggled. She really had teeth. But that was not right. Poplar Fruit clearly remembered reading the parenting books that Wuxia had left behind. It said that a baby's first teeth would only grow at 4 or 5 months old. Kiki was only a little over a month old now, so how could she have teeth so quickly? This was a little strange. Poplar Fruit did not dare to delay, so he called his mother. After a few words of greeting, Poplar Fruit asked about Kiki's situation. After Su Jinfeng asked about Kiki's situation, she smiled and said, "Fruit, this is not a tooth, it's a false tooth. It's quite common for children to have false teeth before they are 3 years old." Su Jinfeng said that although Poplar Fruit did not have such a situation when he was a child, the neighbor's child had false teeth before. At that time, it was very inconvenient to go to the hospital, so she asked the elders, and the elders introduced a local prescription, which was to rub the false tooth with a cloth dipped in salt water. Only by rubbing it, the child's real teeth would be able to grow smoothly in the future. After hanging up the phone, Poplar Fruit fell into deep thought. Using a cloth dipped in salt water to rub the hard lump in Kiki's mouth, wasn't it a little too cruel? How much pain would Kiki have to suffer? Poplar Fruit imagined the scene of Kiki crying as he rubbed her false teeth, and his heart ached. However, if he did not make up his mind to do it, would it affect the normal development of Kiki's real teeth? Poplar Fruit remembered that there was a saying in a book, "Spoiling too much is harmful." After hesitating, Poplar Fruit did not make up his mind in the end. It was still early, so he picked up the phone again and called head nurse Jiang, wanting to ask her if there was a better way. "Auntie Jiang, I'm Poplar Fruit. Yes, I'm not disturbing you, am I? I have a question to ask you." Over the phone, Poplar Fruit told head nurse Jiang about Kiki's situation, and then told her about Su Jinfeng's treatment suggestion. Unexpectedly, Poplar Fruit was reprimanded by head nurse Jiang, saying that he was superstitious, did not believe in science, and only believed in rumors. It turned out that Kiki's white grain-like thing was medically called epithelial beads, also known as horse teeth. It was true that it was not a real tooth, but most babies would go through this stage. It was actually formed by the accumulation of epithelial cells, so it was not a disease at all, and had no effect on the normal development of the child's teeth. As for the horse teeth, Poplar Fruit could choose to ignore them, because they would naturally fall off after a few months. On the contrary, as the folk superstition said, not only would it not be beneficial to use a needle or something to rub it, but it could also hurt the child's oral skin, and there was a risk of bacterial infection, or even a serious disease. Although he was sweating profusely from head nurse Jiang's scolding, Poplar Fruit still felt very lucky. Fortunately, he had asked a professional, or he would have really harmed Kiki. Of course, Su Jinfeng also had good intentions, and she did not know the seriousness of the matter. However, after this incident, Poplar Fruit deeply realized that raising a child required science. He could not blindly do it himself, and he could not be superstitious about traditional methods. In order to better protect Kiki, Poplar Fruit felt that he still needed to learn more about pediatrics, or else he would still make some common mistakes in the future. With lingering fear, Poplar Fruit picked up Kiki and kissed her little face. Kiki did not know that she had escaped a disaster, and quietly laid in Poplar Fruit's arms. Her eyes began to blur, and her face was pressed against her father's chest. Her little hand unconsciously pulled on the corner of her father's shirt, unwilling to move. It seemed that she was sleepy, so Poplar Fruit stood up with Kiki in his arms. After coaxing her to sleep, he put her on her small bed. After returning to the living room, Poplar Fruit read for more than an hour. He suddenly thought of something. It was almost Children's Day. Although Kiki was not even a child, Children's Day was a day of celebration for every child. Poplar Fruit felt that on such a day full of children's laughter, he should do something for Kiki. But what should he do? Poplar Fruit thought about it while scrolling through Weibo on his phone. Hey, Kung Fu Panda's second movie is released. Poplar Fruit was a little surprised to see this news. Poplar Fruit thought of the cartoon that was popular all over the world 3 years ago. He thought of the cute panda that was pursued by countless children. That movie was humorous and interesting, and it swept more than $600 million in the box office worldwide. Back then, Yang Gua had also donated a movie ticket. At that time, she had also laughed out loud and liked it very much. Poplar Fruit made up his mind to take Kiki to see Kung Fu Panda 2 on Children's Day. He believed that Kiki would definitely like it. Poplar Fruit was very confident in his heart. However, Poplar Fruit seemed to have forgotten that his daughter was only 1 month old. Kung Fu Panda returned after 3 years, and it happened to be Children's Day. He estimated that the tickets would be very popular. Therefore, Poplar Fruit turned on his computer, logged onto the cinema's website, and bought 3 tickets in advance. Why did he buy 3 tickets? Poplar Fruit thought that he was bringing Kiki. If Kiki made a scene in the cinema, it was bound to disturb the nearby audience. Therefore, Poplar Fruit simply bought a ticket at the back, and then bought the 2 seats next to it. This way, the impact could be controlled to a small range. Poplar Fruit thought that he was very witty, but would it really be as smooth as he thought? Chapter 35. It's a holiday. Poplar Fruit threw the newly dressed Kiki up high, then put her down, and threw her down again. Of course, he didn't really throw her. Poplar Fruit's hands were tightly holding Kiki's armpits. Kiki was very interested in such high-altitude sports. She shouted happily, her voice intermittently, and when Poplar Fruit put her down, she even tried to grab his hair. After tying the straps, Kiki sat steadily on her father's chest. Today, she was going to go on a trip with her father. Poplar Fruit waved his right hand and shouted, "Let's go!" Kiki giggled again. It seemed that her father's happy mood had infected her. Picking up the bag, his phone rang at the wrong time. Sky City's music came out from the bag. Who's calling? Poplar Fruit wondered. The warm atmosphere was interrupted. The phone screen showed that it was Duan Xueqing, a junior sister who had a good relationship with him. After connecting the phone, he heard Xueqing's soft voice through the phone into Poplar Fruit's ears. Is this Poplar Fruit's senior brother? Duan Xueqing came from Jiangnan, so her voice was soft. Poplar Fruit froze for a moment. He hadn't seen her for a few months, and this junior sister had become so reserved. He smiled and said, "It's me, Xueqing. Didn't I tell you to just call me Brother Yang?" And Brother Yang, is there anything you need help with today? And I'm going to take my graduation photos in a few days. I want to invite Brother Yang back to school to take them together. I don't know if you're free on the 11th? Duan Xueqing asked carefully. Graduation photos? Sure. I'm always free, haha. Poplar Fruit laughed heartily. Really? That's great. That's great. Duan Xueqing exclaimed in a low voice. Duan Xueqing didn't hear the latter half of her words clearly, as if she had covered her mouth. I didn't expect it to be so fast. Xueqing, you're about to graduate. Poplar Fruit sighed. The scene of him welcoming the new arrivals at the train station surfaced in his mind. The slender figure struggling to drag a large suitcase was still so clear. At that time, she was wearing a lavender cap. Her long hair reached her waist, and her clothes were whiter than snow. When she raised her head, she was bright and beautiful in the sunless waiting room. Yeah, after so many years she still hadn't changed. Her voice was still so soft and ethereal. When Poplar Fruit graduated and left school, she still had long hair that reached her waist and wore plain clothes. How's your job search going? Poplar Fruit remembered that when they chatted last year, Duan Xueqing had said that she did not want to continue her studies, nor did she want to go abroad. She wanted to step into society as soon as possible. Yes, I passed the civil servant exam in Guangdong province. Poplar Fruit slapped his head. Why were there so many people passing the civil servant exam? It was as if they had passed the exam easily. Poplar Fruit had taken the exam before he graduated last year as well, but the result was terrible. He didn't even pass the written exam. Congratulations, haha. You'll have an iron rice bowl from now on. Poplar Fruit congratulated her sincerely. Poplar Fruit was very happy for her to have a stable job after graduation. Yeah. Which department are you in? Jianghe Subdistrict. I'm a clerk. Duan Xueqing said sweetly. Jianghe Subdistrict? It's not that far from here. It's just the distance of 2 bus stops. Have you found a place to stay? Poplar Fruit asked in surprise. Not yet, Duan Xueqing said. I don't know how to find one. The girl was very good in her studies, but she was a little nerdy and otherworldly. Okay, I'll help you look around to see if there are any houses for rent nearby. Okay, thank you, Brother Yang. Duan Xueqing said happily. Okay, I'll contact you if there's any news. Let's meet on the 11th, Poplar Fruit said. After chatting for so long, Kiki was a little impatient and twisted in Poplar Fruit's chest. Okay, bye, Brother Yang. After hanging up the phone, Poplar Fruit quickly comforted his daughter, picked up the bag and shouted happily, Let's go! After closing the door, Poplar Fruit went downstairs. Lu Gillen and his family were already waiting in their minivan. Today, Lu Gillen and Fong Wenjing were going to take Xiaodong out to play, but they weren't going to watch a movie. They were going to the amusement park, so they picked up Poplar Fruit on the way. Along the way, Xiaodong was very restless in the back seat because he was too excited about going to play. He always wanted to sneak over to tease Kiki. Kiki didn't want to talk to him, so he was more energetic. In the end, Fong Wenjing couldn't help but laugh and scold him, ordering him to sit back. When they arrived at the cinema, Poplar Fruit and Kiki got off the car. After saying goodbye to Lu Gillen and the others, they turned around and saw a sea of people. The spacious entrance of the cinema was crowded with people. Most of them were parents holding their children's hands. The children's faces were filled with excitement. Some even jumped out of their parents' line of sight, only to be pulled back again. All kinds of vendors walked through the crowd, using colorful balloons and strange small toys to attract the children's attention. Wherever they went, it would inevitably cause disputes between the children and their parents. Some parents couldn't resist the children's begging, so they took out a few dozen yuan to buy a small flashing ball that was worth less than a few yuan. Some parents couldn't bear to part with it, so they dragged their reluctant children into the cinema. Children's minds were lively. As long as they didn't see it, they would stop after a while. Squeezing through the crowd, Poplar Fruit half-hugged Kiki and walked into the cinema with difficulty. In the lobby, there was a place that sold popcorn. A whole cabinet of fragrant freshly baked popcorn was surrounded by a group of salivating children. The salesperson shouted at the top of his lungs to protect the glass cabinet. At the same time, he deftly used a small shovel to put the popcorn into a paper tube and handed it to the helpless parents next to him. Poplar Fruit didn't plan to buy popcorn today. Kiki couldn't eat it, and he didn't want Kiki to see him eat it. Indeed, there were a lot of people who came for Kung Fu Panda 2. Some parents who didn't buy tickets in advance came to the ticket office, but were disappointed to see that the tickets were sold out. In the end, they couldn't go empty-handed. What was the point of bringing their children to the cinema on Children's Day? So many parents had to frown and buy tickets for other domestic cartoons. When it was almost time, Poplar Fruit walked to the cinema marked on the ticket. At the door, he was stopped by the staff. Sir, you can't bring your child in. The staff politely said to Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit felt very puzzled. He pointed to the people who were walking in with their children and said, Why can they, but I can't? Sir, your child is too young. Our cinema has a rule that children between 0 and 2 years old can't be brought into the cinema. You're worried that she will affect other audiences, right? Poplar Fruit took out the ticket and explained to the staff. I bought 3 cards, all of which are at the back. And don't worry, my child is very obedient. She won't cry in there. You really can't, this is the rule. The staff earnestly advised. Our rule is actually for your own good. Children are too young. The cinema is so dark and loud, it will have a bad effect on them. Please understand. Patting his head, Poplar Fruit suddenly realized. That's right. Why didn't I think of that? Movies are very interesting and funny to me. But Kiki is so young, how can she understand? In such a dark place, where there are strange sounds in all directions, An immature child will easily be left with a psychological shadow of fear. After thanking the staff, Poplar Fruit walked out. He bitterly smiled in his heart. A carefully planned Children's Day activity to watch a movie was ruined just like that. He was really an incompetent father. Walking to the door, Poplar Fruit met another incompetent father. I want to watch Kung Fu Panda. I just want to watch Kung Fu Panda, whoa. A child's cry attracted the attention of everyone nearby. Although the family's clothes were neat, it could be seen at a glance that they weren't from a brand store. Obviously, they were an ordinary working family. The middle-aged father turned his head and looked around. He awkwardly lowered his head. He was not used to the feeling of being watched in public. He didn't know where to put his hands and feet. The mother squatted on the ground and softly comforted the child, who was crying in disappointment. The child looked to be 8 or 9 years old. He was dressed very well, but when his tears flowed, it was like a flood that broke the dam. Yonggwa touched the 3 movie tickets in her pocket that she hadn't used yet. She smiled and walked forward. The helpless father stood there, helplessly looking down at his wife and child. Suddenly, a stack of movie tickets was put in front of him, and a clear voice sounded in his ears. I'll let you take a look at these 3 cards. The middle-aged father opened his mouth and looked up at Poplar Fruit with a look of disbelief. Take it, it's the next scene. Poplar Fruit touched Kiki's soft hair and smiled. Oh. The middle-aged father hurriedly took out his wallet from his trouser pocket and hurriedly said, How much is it? He lowered his head and counted the money in the wallet. There was only 1 red bill, but there were a lot of loose change. Poplar Fruit's sharp eyes even saw a few brown 10 cents. Poplar Fruit held the movie tickets in his right hand and pressed down on the middle-aged father's hands and wallet. He smiled and said, You don't have to pay. I'm not a scalper. Seeing the confused look on the family's face, Poplar Fruit continued to explain. I originally wanted to bring my daughter to watch the movie today, but I was afraid that it would affect other people. So I bought a few more tickets. But she's too young. She was only 1 month old a few days ago, and the theater didn't let her in. So these tickets were going to go to waste. But since you guys happened to come, you can take them. How can I not pay you? The middle-aged father said embarrassedly. His wife quickly stood up and agreed. The little boy, who realized that things had taken a turn for the better, wiped his tears and stopped crying. You really don't have to. Poplar Fruit smiled and said. It's just 3 tickets, it's not worth much. Hurry up and go watch it. Aldi, it's about to start. After taking the movie tickets, the family of 3 bowed to Poplar Fruit and thanked him profusely. Then, they happily rushed to the theater. Poplar Fruit smiled as he watched them leave. He felt very happy. Although it was just a small matter for him, it was an incomparably precious gift for this family. He had put in a little bit of effort, and in exchange, they would be happy for a holiday, and even smiles for many days. Giving roses to others, the hand will have a lingering fragrance. Poplar Fruit felt that it wasn't that he didn't gain anything. All of this was seen by Kiki. Of course, she couldn't remember it in her heart. But Poplar Fruit believed that good conduct would be imprinted in Kiki's subconscious. Although he couldn't watch the movie, Poplar Fruit was still very happy. He took Kiki to the children's mall. He wanted to buy some accessories and toys for Kiki's crib. He often saw these in some American movies, and they were very beautiful. On Children's Day, Poplar Fruit decided to decorate Kiki's night with a bright starry sky. Chapter 36. As soon as he got into the taxi, Poplar Fruit began to feel conflicted. Today, Song Jiwon asked him to go with him to look at houses. This was mentioned during Kiki's 1-month birthday. Poplar Fruit readily agreed. However, after carrying Kiki out of the door, Poplar Fruit remembered that he neglected one thing. 2 grown men carrying a baby girl to look at houses together. What was this? Even if they were not looking at houses, what would others think if they went out with such a combination? China was not as open as the United States. Poplar Fruit remembered a funny video that he had seen in the United States before. The 2 buddies were wearing the same t-shirts with the words, "We are," and "not gay" written on them. They went shopping with their arms around each other's shoulders. Along the way, they attracted the attention of passers-by. They thought that it was all due to their performance art. It was not until they walked to a shopping mall and stood in front of a full-length mirror that they realized that the word "not" was covered. The scene that followed made people not know whether to laugh or cry. They pulled the passers-by on the road and explained that they were not gay. However, some passers-by looked at them and said meaningfully, "I understand. I understand." What a dilemma. Imagining the strange looks that might appear, Poplar Fruit wished that he could find a hole to hide in. When they arrived, Poplar Fruit hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open and walking down. From afar, Song Jiwen saw Poplar Fruit and waved at him. Poplar Fruit also saw him and a girl beside him. Could it be Song Jiwen's new girlfriend? Regardless, Poplar Fruit let out a long sigh of relief. With a girl around, the situation would not be awkward. Walking up to them, Song Jiwen introduced them to each other. "Kitten, this is my good brother Poplar Fruit. You can call him Brother Yang. Laogua, this is my girlfriend Mao Zhuyan, nicknamed Little Cat." Poplar Fruit sized up Song Jiwen's girlfriend. She was petite and looked quite cute. The only thing that stood out was that under her tight low-cut t-shirt, her proud peaks were about to pop out. This was also Song Jiwen's special taste for a long time, so Poplar Fruit was not surprised. The two of them greeted each other in a friendly manner, and Kitten's attention was attracted by Kiki, who was in Poplar Fruit's arms. She covered her mouth and exclaimed, "Ah, this little girl is so cute. It's so kawaii." As she spoke, she moved closer. Her heavy breasts made Poplar Fruit feel a lot of pressure. He smiled bitterly and secretly gestured to Song Jiwen, asking him to pull his big-breasted but brainless girlfriend away. Walking behind them, Poplar Fruit also heard Kitten acting coquettishly to Song Jiwen. "Husband, Grandpa. I also want a baby. It's so cute." Hearing her dragging out the word husband, Poplar Fruit couldn't help but snicker behind them. However, he secretly covered Kiki's ears. He couldn't let Kiki learn bad things. Song Jiwen advised her. "But giving birth will make your body fat. You won't look good if you become fat." "Yeah, but I really like babies. What do you think I should do? What should I do?" Kitten's coquettishness made Poplar Fruit, who was eavesdropping behind, have goosebumps. He really didn't know how Song Jiwen could stand it. However, this guy was probably enjoying himself. It was just a small interlude. Under the guidance of the real estate agent, they quickly walked to the front of the apartment building. This building was located in the upscale residential area of Jinli in the XC district. The residential environment was good, and there was even a small garden inside. There was a pool, a cobblestone corridor, and large patches of grass. According to the real estate agent, the residential area also provided a fitness club for residents. There was a swimming pool, a gym, a basketball court, and everything else. Most of the houses in the residential area were sold. What Poplar Fruit and the others wanted to see today was an additional upscale apartment building. The elevator went up to the 5th floor. The real estate agent opened the door and let Poplar Fruit and the others in. Their first impression was that it was beautiful. The style was a mix of Chinese and European. It was simple but not simple. The fruit green wallpaper, the long white TV cabinet, the white fabric combination sofa, and the floor-to-ceiling windows made the living room particularly spacious and bright. Walking from the floor-to-ceiling windows to the balcony, they could see the lush green plants in the residential area. The dining room and the living room were connected. The independent kitchen was equipped with a refrigerator that opened from top to bottom, but it didn't seem crowded. The integrated stove, cabinets, and sinks looked clean and tidy. Although there were no pots, bowls, ladles, and spoons, Poplar Fruit was already eager to try. The master bedroom was quite big, and the secondary bedroom was slightly smaller. However, the secondary bedroom had a circular floor-to-ceiling window. The low cabinet made of smooth tiles formed a long table that could lean against the wall and sit. It was a good place to read quietly. Poplar Fruit walked around and felt that the house was very good. He wanted to see if the price was suitable. If the price was acceptable, he suggested that Song Jiwen rent it. "I don't like this house very much." Before Poplar Fruit could express his opinion, Song Jiwen spoke after whispering with Kitten for a while. Song Jiwen and his girlfriend didn't like the small and fresh decoration of the living room. Moreover, They felt that 2 bedrooms and 2 living rooms were too big. For them, Kitten usually had to go home. Even if she came to have sex with Song Jiwen, they wouldn't live in 2 separate houses. After listening to their explanation, the agent understood. As an excellent real estate agent, he naturally had to work hard to find houses to match the needs of his clients. He took out the iPad from his backpack and opened the photo album. His fingers moved quickly, and suddenly his eyes lit up. He smiled and said, "Mr. Song, according to your request, I found a house that matches you. I believe you will like it. And this house is on the 5th floor. Do you want to come with me to have a look?" Since he was already here, it wouldn't be a waste of time to see one more, so Song Jiwen agreed. The agent then made a phone call and asked his colleague to send the key over. Before walking out of the house, Yonghua turned around and looked at the house again, deep in thought. There were 4 rooms on the 1st floor of this apartment. The house that the agent mentioned was diagonally across the street. This one had 1 bedroom and 1 living room. There was no kitchen, and there was only 1 bathroom. But it was also very spacious with a balcony and good lighting. Song Jiwen glanced at the 2 ball-shaped sofas in the middle that looked like deflated basketballs. Poplar Fruit knew that he must be thinking, how cool would it be if I could lie down and play TV games? The ball-shaped sofas were matched with other oddly shaped furniture, and there were light tubes embedded in the wall. The whole living room had a sci-fi feel. There was a rattan rocking chair that looked like a swing on the balcony, surrounded by several potted plants. Kitten saw it at first glance and jumped over with joy, curling up on the comfortable cushion of the rocking chair. As the rocking chair swayed gently, her light singing voice floated out from the green leaves of the potted plants. "The most romantic thing I can think of is to grow old with you slowly, collecting bits and pieces of laughter along the way, and sitting in the rocking chair and talking slowly in the future." Although it was a bit retarded, it had to be said that Kitten's voice was really nice. If there was an entertainment company to package and modify her, she might be able to become popular in the music industry. Seeing that Song Jiwen was interested, Poplar Fruit smiled and discussed with him. After confirming that Song Jiwen intended to rent this house, Poplar Fruit pulled the agent aside to discuss the price. Poplar Fruit came from a trading company and learned a lot of negotiation skills. This agent had been in the real estate industry for many years and was also very good at raising prices with clients. This was a match for him. For more than 10 minutes, the 2 of them were quoting classics and arguing back and forth. In the end, the real estate agent smiled bitterly and said, "Brother, I really can't win against you. I admit defeat. How about this? I won't ask for much. Let's just set the price at 1,500 yuan, okay? I really can't go any lower." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "This house is 50 square meters, and the one just now is 80 square meters. Both of them are 3,000 yuan. We'll pack them up and rent them together." Song Jiwen heard this and his eyes widened. He pulled Poplar Fruit's sleeve. While they were bargaining, Poplar Fruit signaled Song Jiwen to talk later. The agent's head was covered in sweat. He smiled bitterly and said, "Brother, you can't calculate the price like that. The one just now is almost 90 square meters, and it can't be compared. Our location is so good, and a 90 square meter house costs 3,000 yuan. Poplar Fruit knew that the location was good. When he came just now, he also observed the nearby traffic. There was a bus at the entrance of Jinli District, and the subway station was 500 meters to the left. There were all kinds of large shopping malls and entertainment venues near the subway station. Without the agent's introduction, Poplar Fruit knew that there must be a large-scale food market nearby. This place was only 3 stops away from Canton Tower. Standing on the balcony, one could see the new symbol of Guangzhou through the tall buildings. Poplar Fruit didn't care about the agent's previous offer of 3,000 yuan. The price was negotiated. They talked for more than 10 minutes, and finally set the price at 4,000 yuan. Song Jiwen's house was 1,400 yuan a month, and the one just now was 2,600 yuan a month. Poplar Fruit also asked the agent to waive the property management fees for 3 months. This price was very good. One must know that the 2 houses were luxuriously decorated. Apart from the appliances, all the other furniture was available. Moreover, they were in such a location. Poplar Fruit really made a profit. Seeing that the rental contract was about to be signed, Song Jiwen, who had been holding back for a long time, finally couldn't help but ask, Lao Gua, who are you renting that house for? Poplar Fruit smiled and said, I'm living alone. Why? You don't welcome me to live across from you? Why wouldn't you be welcome? I couldn't ask for more. Song Jiwen excitedly punched Poplar Fruit and said, in the future, it'll be more convenient for us to play games at night. I can also go to your house to eat and drink, haha. You're always welcome, haha. Poplar Fruit also laughed. That's right. After looking at the house before, Poplar Fruit felt that the decoration of the house was tailor-made for him. He liked the fresh color of the room, the layout of the kitchen, and the scenery of the balcony. He also wanted to sit on the big window of the guest room and read while leaning against the slanting sun. 2,600 yuan for rent, in the past Poplar Fruit's eyes, would be an expensive expense. It was a complete waste of money, but now it was different. Poplar Fruit didn't lack money. He could earn 2,600 yuan in a day. Since that was the case, why not change to a more comfortable environment for himself and Kiki? Even his previous rented house, Poplar Fruit had thought about it. Didn't his junior sister, Duan Xueqing, ask him to help her find a house? What other house could be better than his? It was convenient, close to her workplace, cheap rent, and spacious. Most importantly, the nearby public security environment was very good. This was the most suitable place for a single girl. Poplar Fruit's choice could be said to be killing 2 birds with 1 stone, or even 3 birds with 1 stone. Originally, when Song Jiwen acted first and reported later, Poplar Fruit was still scratching his head about how to tell his godparents. But now it was easy. With Poplar Fruit living across from Song Jiwen, Poplar Fruit believed that Song Chunfang and the rest would never scold him. Instead, they would give him the green light and readily agree. Chapter 37. After leaving the foreign trade company, Poplar Fruit thought that he would never have to see Brian again. But the world was so small. Walking out of Jinli community, Poplar Fruit was waiting at the bus stop with Kiki in his arms. Without waiting for a taxi, a black Toyota slowly drove over and stopped in front of Poplar Fruit. While Yang Guo was wondering, the car window rolled down, and that familiar face that deserved a beating popped out. Yo, isn't this Poplar Fruit? Brian said vaguely with a cigarette in his mouth. Yang Guo glanced at him and couldn't be bothered with him. What? No food after resigning? Or did you kidnap a child and come to this rich man's place to beg? The more Brian spoke, the more excited he became. His upper body was leaning against the car window, and most of the buttons on his shirt were unbuttoned. His chest was so thin that his ribs could be seen. His skin was pale, and there was a silver cross around his neck. Yang Guo's eyes were sharp, and she could see the crucifix on it. Poplar Fruit frowned and covered Kiki's ears, so that these dirty words wouldn't disturb Kiki, who was sleeping. I'm telling you, if you go against me, you won't have a good time. Seeing that Poplar Fruit didn't answer, this guy became more and more proud. He took a puff of his cigarette and spat it into Poplar Fruit's arms. If you can't do it, then run. If you run, your little follower will be in for a tragedy. The thick white smoke was spewed towards Kiki. Poplar Fruit jumped out of the way and covered Kiki's mouth and nose. This was intolerable. How dare he spit at Kiki? Poplar Fruit could no longer hold back the anger in his heart. He protected Kiki's little head with his left hand and strode forward. His right hand was lightning fast towards Brian's head. What are you doing? Brian was only able to finish half of his sentence before he stopped abruptly. Poplar Fruit hooked his hand around Brian's neck, and with a gentle twist, Brian felt the world spinning around him. His whole body was flipped 180 degrees, and then he was pulled out of the car. If it weren't for Poplar Fruit, he would have fallen head first to the ground. Lying on the ground, Brian's nose was burned by the cigarette in his mouth. He finally woke up from his dizzy state. Wow. While making weird noises, Han's hands moved randomly on his face. He wanted to turn over, but found that one of his feet was still hanging on the window. After struggling and rolling, Brian finally stood up from the ground. His nose was red as if he had been stung by a wasp. The cigarette butt fell to the ground, splashing a few sparks. Suddenly, a large shoe stepped down, covering the sky and covering the earth, annihilating the last bit of light. Poplar Fruit fiercely twisted the ground with his left foot. Brian, who had just stood up, was so scared that he took a few steps back and put his hands into a defensive posture. Laughing, Poplar Fruit did not make any further moves. "You damn beggar. Believe it or not, I can call someone to arrest you and take you to the police station any minute." Brian cursed. Poplar Fruit rolled his eyes. This guy's IQ was really hopeless. Too lazy to correct his mistake, Poplar Fruit just squinted his eyes and looked down at him. Poplar Fruit was now 1.8 meters tall, much taller than Brian. Seeing that Poplar Fruit was indifferent, and that there was a child lying in Poplar Fruit's arms, Brian encouraged himself in his heart. "It's okay. I just didn't pay attention and fell into his trap. He's just a student, how could he beat me? Fuck, how dare you hit me?" Brian's heart was filled with anger, and he fiercely threw a punch at Poplar Fruit. His punch was a street punk's move, Black Tiger heart gouging. Although it was gouging the heart gouging, there was a child lying in Poplar Fruit's chest. But Brian did not care and threw a punch without mercy. Poplar Fruit was even angrier. This guy in front of him was getting more and more out of hand. Was he not afraid of hurting the child? Poplar Fruit made up his mind that today, he must let this guy have a taste of his own medicine. Protecting Kiki, Poplar Fruit spun his feet and dodged Brian's punch. Brian did not know how to hold back when punching, so he put all his strength into it. After missing the punch, he staggered a few steps forward, feeling a little depressed in his chest. Poplar Fruit put his right hand on Brian's fist, and then his right foot hooked Brian's bearing leg, and Brian's whole body flew into the air. Finally, Poplar Fruit twisted his right hand again, and Brian, who was flying face down, felt the world was spinning again. His whole body turned 180 degrees in the air, and once again looked up at the sky. Before his eyes could focus, he fell heavily to the ground. This fall on his back almost made Brian choke, and it took him a long time to recover. Although his eyes were open, his vision was all white and distorted. His mouth was wide open, and a few painful moans were squeezed out from his throat. At this moment, Brian's mind was blank, and he could only feel the severe pain from every muscle and bone in his body. "Hoo-hoo. Old Gua, what happened?" Song Jiwen, who had just gone to buy water, hurriedly rushed back, and Kitten trotted all the way behind him with water in her arms. She was very tired. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Don't worry, it's just a small person." Taking deep breaths, it took Brian a long time to recover from the shock. After standing up, his eyes swept over Poplar Fruit and the others, lingering on Kitten's bulging chest for a long time, and then swept over Poplar Fruit's calm face, and his pupils slightly shrank. "Don't be too arrogant." Brian pointed his finger at Poplar Fruit and shouted, "You wait, I'll ask the city management to take care of you, you damn beggar." "Damn, what are you pointing at?" Song Jiwen wanted to rush up and beat him, but was stopped by Poplar Fruit. Brian was shocked, and he quickly retreated back into the car, leaving a sentence, "You're bullying me with numbers, just you wait." Then he turned the steering wheel and ran away. "What kind of person is this?" "Bah!" Song Jiwen fiercely spat in the direction of the car, and he turned to look at Poplar Fruit. "Old Gua, are you hurt? I just saw you fight with him." "Haha, how could I be hurt?" Poplar Fruit put his right palm on Song Jiwen's shoulder and laughed. "The one who's hurt is that guy. I've knocked him down twice." "Damn, when did you become so powerful?" Song Jiwen said with a smile. "Do you know that guy? He used to be a colleague in the company, a rich second generation, but he's a fake. He's just a villain, don't mention him." Poplar Fruit shook his head and said, "Okay, if you have any problems, just let me know. I have childhood friends in the police station." Song Jiwen knew that Poplar Fruit always had a good idea, so he didn't ask any more questions. Finally, they stopped a taxi to go home, but Brian still didn't show up. Poplar Fruit knew that this guy was just pretending to be arrogant. He came from the countryside and relied on his uncle's relationship with the company's big boss to act like a tyrant in the company. Outside, he only knew a few bad friends, but to call a team of city management officers or a few police officers, he really wasn't qualified. However, when he got home, Poplar Fruit thought about a sentence that Brian said. "If you run away, your little follower will be in for a tragedy." When Brian said this, his voice was proud. How could Poplar Fruit forget? In the company, the only person who could be called by Brian as his little follower was Lu Jingyi. Could it be that he made things difficult for Jingyi? Poplar Fruit put the sleeping Kiki on the crib and covered the mosquito net. Picking up the phone and looking at the time, it wasn't lunch time yet. Poplar Fruit pressed Lu Jingyi's number. The phone was quickly connected. "Hello, is this Brother Yang?" Jingyi's sweet voice came from the phone, and her tone was full of surprise. "And it's me." Poplar Fruit smiled. "Brother Yang, how are you now? Are you okay?" Lu Jingyi asked nervously. "I'm good. I eat and drink well, and I have my own time. I also earn a lot of money as a translator. And that's good." After a few words of greeting, Poplar Fruit began to ask, "How are you doing in the company now?" "And it's okay," Lu Jingyi said with some hesitation. "Is it really okay?" Poplar Fruit didn't believe it. He then asked, "Your internship is almost over. How's the promotion process going?" "And this still needs to wait for a while." Lu Jingyi's voice was a little low. Sure enough, Poplar Fruit guessed right. Brian must have stopped her in the promotion process. The company's practice was to sign a formal contract more than half a month in advance if the performance was good. "What did I tell you when I left? What did you want to tell me? You're still hiding it. Did Brian make things difficult for you?" Poplar Fruit frowned and said, I. Lu Jingyi began to cry and couldn't speak clearly. Was it so serious? Poplar Fruit didn't expect Lu Jingyi to cry. He comforted Lu Jingyi and scolded Brian in his heart. While Lu Jingyi was sobbing, Poplar Fruit intermittently asked about the cause and effect of the matter. It turned out that after Poplar Fruit's resignation, Brian targeted Lu Jingyi, who was gentle and weak, and treated her as Poplar Fruit's confidant. At first, when the company's big boss and other people were there, he was more restrained, and Lu Jingyi had been tolerating him. But at the end of last month, the company's boss and most of the senior executives went to Yingjili to participate in the exhibition. In the absence of the tiger, the monkey became the king, and Brian became more and more arrogant. He and the deputy manager of the personnel department, who had a good relationship with him, began to make things difficult for Lu Jingyi. He even asked Lu Jingyi to accompany him for one night, or else she would not be promoted. It was unknown whether he really liked Lu Jingyi's beauty, or deliberately wanted to retaliate against Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit felt that it was a combination of both. After all, Brian's debauchery in his private life was known to everyone in the company, except for the big boss. Lu Jingyi naturally couldn't agree, but seeing that her internship was about to end in half a month, and that she still hadn't decided on a permanent position, she was also depressed, anxious, and wronged, but she didn't know who to talk to. She just forced a smile and hid it from Poplar Fruit. Now that it was exposed by Poplar Fruit, the long-suppressed grievances in her heart poured out like water from a broken dam. Comforting Lu Jingyi with good words, Poplar Fruit was also secretly thinking about countermeasures. It seemed that he had just let Brian go after throwing him twice. Poplar Fruit didn't expect that he was not only a villain, but also a dirty, shameless, and lustful villain. If Poplar Fruit knew about this, beating him into a panda would be a light punishment. But beating him wouldn't solve the problem. There was no way to let Lu Jingyi continue to stay in the company if he beat him up. And if he hurt him, he might have to pay for it. To beat a snake, you have to hit where it hurts. To deal with a villain like Brian, you have to make him completely lie down and never rise again. But where was his weak spot? Poplar Fruit laughed in his heart. Brian's weak spot was too obvious. If it weren't for his uncle, he would always be a small gangster in the countryside. If he could make the big boss of the company completely break up with him, he would be cut off all the claws and teeth he could show arrogantly. In the end, he would have to go back to his hometown with his tail between his legs. After Lu Jingyi's mood finally stabilized, Poplar Fruit told Lu Jingyi to go back to work as usual, protect herself, and leave the rest to poplar fruit. Chapter 38. After careful planning, Poplar Fruit came up with a two-stage plan. Since he wanted to cut the grass, he had to get rid of the roots. He had to completely eliminate all the hidden dangers. Poplar Fruit not only wanted Brian to be unable to harass Lu Jingyi, but he also planned to secretly knock Brian off his pedestal, so that he could no longer appear in this city with his head held high. To complete this two-stage plan, he had to find a person. Fat Dragon, Poplar Fruit's good friend in junior high school. His real name was Long O. Because of his extraordinary figure, everyone called him Fat Dragon. Fat Dragon stopped going to school after graduating from high school. The reason was, am I the one teaching them, or are they the one teaching me? His arrogance was reasonable. He taught himself to program. In junior high school, he made a lot of money by writing game cheats. After high school, because of the country's strong crackdown, he stopped and switched to learning hacking. How strong was he now? Poplar Fruit didn't know, but he knew that in high school, Fat Dragon could easily hack a portal and then seal it as his sky. Poplar Fruit and Fat Dragon's friendship began in the second year of junior high school. One time they changed seats. Poplar Fruit and Fat Dragon sat next to each other. At that time, there were often bullies on campus who asked for protection money from students who looked easy to bully. Fat Dragon was short and fat, and looked easy to bully. Poplar Fruit hated evil. He didn't want his deskmate to be bullied, so he fought with those bullies. Although they lost the battle, Poplar Fruit's desperation scared them. From then on, the two sides didn't interfere with each other. Fat Dragon also got rid of the fate of being exploited. Since that incident, Poplar Fruit and Fat Dragon changed from ordinary classmates to close brothers. After so many years, even if they were not in the same city, Poplar Fruit and Fat Dragon still kept in touch. Every time they went home, Fat Dragon would drive Poplar Fruit out to play. One more person had to be mentioned, Poplar Fruit's brother-in-law, Yang Chongguan. Yang Chongguan was Fat Dragon's cousin. In the past, Yang Chongguan sent Fat Dragon to look for Poplar Fruit to play. When he saw Yang Ping, he was shocked. Later, without Poplar Fruit noticing, the two hooked up. Therefore, Fat Dragon and Poplar Fruit could be considered relatives. Just as she dialed Fat Dragon's number, his thick voice came through. Guozi, you're not a good friend. You even gave birth to a daughter, but you didn't tell me. Needless to say, Yang Guo knew that her sister had leaked out Chi-Chi's matter. Haha, you know too? I didn't want my parents to know about this, so I didn't tell anyone. You can't blame me. Poplar Fruit laughed. I don't care, you have to treat me. I want to eat all the seafood in Shui Yifang Hotel. Fat Dragon shouted on the phone. Okay, when I come home, I'll definitely treat you. Poplar Fruit promised. Hey, you're not home? Fat Dragon asked strangely. I thought you came back to play with me. Didn't you resign? Why are you staying in Yangcheng? I have something to do even though I resigned. Moreover, Yangcheng is good in all aspects. When my daughter grows up, it'll be convenient for her to go to school. Guozi, you've been imprisoned by your daughter. Fei Long chuckled. TSK, you're talking about me. Aren't you the same? The two of them chatted for a while, and finally got back to the main topic. Poplar Fruit told him his idea, and Fat Dragon agreed. The two of them discussed on the phone for a long time, refining Poplar Fruit's plan. Poplar Fruit could hear Fat Dragon's excitement on the phone, and he laughed in his heart. In the past 2 years, Fat Dragon became a lot more serious, because his family introduced him to a girlfriend. After not doing bad things for so long, it seems like his hands are itching. After hanging up the phone and translating for a while in front of the computer, Kiki woke up. Poplar Fruit happily prepared hot water for her to take a bath. The hair on Chi-Chi's head had grown a little longer, but it was still a little sparse. The color was pale yellow, and the roots were beginning to show signs of turning black. It was estimated that the little girl would soon turn into a black girl. Poplar Fruit didn't plan to cut Kiki's hair yet. Although there was a custom to cut Kiki's hair when she was 2 months old, it was more scientific to do it when she was 2 months old. The child's skin was thin, and her immune system was weak. If he shaved her hair, it would easily hurt her skin and cause a skin infection. After adjusting the water temperature, Poplar Fruit removed all of Kiki's hair. After washing her little face, Poplar Fruit carried her into the water. The clear and warm water in the pink bathtub was just below Kiki's chest. The little yellow duck floating on the water quickly attracted Kiki's attention. Poplar Fruit held one of Kiki's little arms with one hand and scooped up water to wet her body with the other. Kiki stared at the little yellow duck floating in the water. Her mouth formed an O shape, and her upper lip curled up slightly. It looked so cute. She happily patted the water with her other little hand, wanting to touch the little yellow duck. When Poplar Fruit applied the soap, Kiki raised her head happily, as if saying to her father, "Look, look." When he bathed her, Kiki screamed and laughed. She couldn't stop at all. She couldn't close her mouth, and even stuck out her little tongue. A few days ago, because the weather was particularly hot, Kiki's back had a little bit of heat rash. Poplar Fruit immediately became vigilant. Every day when she bathed, he added a little more golden baby water. He also removed the thick quilt from Kiki's bed, leaving only a small blanket to cover her stomach. Usually, after drinking milk, Poplar Fruit would give Kiki a little more water. Now that the heat rash had finally disappeared, Kiki's skin returned to its usual white and smooth state. Bathing in summer was still very comfortable. Kiki played happily in the water, and the little yellow duck was being swam around by her. However, Poplar Fruit wouldn't let her soak in the water for too long. After washing her hair, Poplar Fruit wrapped her in a bath towel and carried her back to the room. The floor was filled with laughter. On the night of May 10th, Poplar Fruit, who was leaning on the sofa armrest and reading, received a call from Duan Xueqing. "Brother Yang." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Xueqing, what's up?" "I have to take my graduation photos tomorrow." Duan Xueqing's voice sounded a little faint, with a hint of resentment. "Brother Yang, you didn't contact me." "Yeah, I remember. I'll go over tomorrow." Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said, he remembered that he said that he would contact her if there was any news about the rental. However, he didn't say that he would contact her before taking his graduation photos. Poplar Fruit originally planned to tell her face to face. "Yeah." Duan Xueqing was silent for a while, then said, "Brother Yang, are you coming with Sister Ran?" Hearing this name, Poplar Fruit said after a long time, "No, I broke up with her." The other end of the phone was silent for a while, then said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have mentioned it." Her tone seemed to be a little higher. To break the stiff atmosphere, Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "It's okay, it's okay. It's all in the past. I have to bring a guest with me tomorrow. It's a surprise, haha." "Yeah, I'll wait and see." Duan Xueqing smiled gently. Since he had already made the call, Poplar Fruit might as well tell her about the apartment. "Xueqing, have you found an apartment yet?" "Not yet. I don't know how to find one." It seemed that the otherworldly Miss Duan still hadn't taken action. Luckily, Poplar Fruit helped her. Otherwise, she would have a headache. "How about you live in my apartment? The one you came to before." Poplar Fruit smiled. Ah. Duan Xueqing didn't expect Poplar Fruit to say that. She was like a frightened deer, covering her mouth and screaming. "Oh, it's not what you think." Poplar Fruit realized the mistake in his previous sentence and quickly explained, "What I mean is, I'm going to rent another apartment, and then I'll transfer my current apartment to you. I went to look at the apartment a few days ago. I've already rented the apartment over there. I plan to move there in a few days. Then I remembered that you were going to rent an apartment. My place is very close to your workplace. You've also seen it. The apartment is good. The rent is cheap. The surrounding environment is good. And the neighbors are quite nice. So I thought I might as well transfer it to you. What do you think?" "Yeah," Duan Xueqing said softly. "Brother Yang, your apartment is quite good. Are you really not going to live there?" Yang didn't know if he had heard wrongly, but he actually heard a trace of regret hidden in her voice. He probably misheard. Poplar Fruit shook his head and said, "Yeah, why don't you come over again when you have time?" "Yeah, I like it very much," Duan Xueqing said happily. "Okay, let's contact each other tomorrow morning when I go to school." "Okay, goodbye, Brother Yang." Putting down the phone, Poplar Fruit sat silently on the sofa. A figure was floating in his mind. Of course, it wasn't Duan Xueqing, but the beautiful figure of Lu Yunran that was brought up by the phone call. I thought I had let go of her. Poplar Fruit looked at the ceiling with melancholy, because now when he closed his eyes, all he could see was her frown and smile, and her crying face. How is she now? He didn't know why, but he remembered Chen Dixing's long time no see. Chen Dixing's faint sad voice seemed to ring in his ears. How I want to meet you, look at your recent changes, no longer talking about the past. Just small talk to say a word to you. Just a word, long time no see. It really seems like a long time no see. Counting with his fingers, more than a month has passed. Poplar Fruit's heart trembled, and his nose was slightly sour. Even if they quarreled during the Cold War, even if they lived apart, since Poplar Fruit and Lu Yunran fell in love, they had never lost contact for such a long period of time, or even a week. Poplar Fruit still remembered that when they were in their senior year, because of differences in opinion about finding a job, the two of them quarreled until they almost broke up. The next evening the sky was drizzling. Downstairs in the dormitory, Poplar Fruit tightly hugged Lu Yunran, who was silly and didn't know how to hold an umbrella. Her cold tears were on his face, and their fingers were tightly intertwined behind his back. Yesterday's fierce anger had been extinguished, and the broken cracks had been filled. However, was that stupid girl okay now? Even though he was eager to know her situation, Poplar Fruit didn't hear from her. If there was anything else that he looked forward to the most, Poplar Fruit just wanted to be able to sit with her in a quiet coffee shop again, look at her, talk about recent trivial matters, and ask her if her 3 meals a day were normal. Had it become an extravagant hope? It was like a sweet photo, and only his lonely figure was left. Poplar Fruit sat in a daze, looking up, his eyes unfocused. Some things flowed into his mouth, and it was salty. Unknowingly, his face was covered in tears. Chapter 39. Summer nights were short and days were long. At 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, the sky was already blue. A few white clouds floated lazily in the sky, but they were also dyed a brilliant golden by the warm sun. Poplar Fruit woke Kiki up early to wipe her face and feed her milk. Kiki's eyelids drooped and her mouth was slightly tilted. She leaned her head on Poplar Fruit's chest and didn't want to move. Yanggui used a sling to hold Chi-Chi in front of her chest, and then began to pack. They were going to stay outside for a long time today, so Poplar Fruit had to prepare everything. In addition to a change of diapers and a set of clothes, Poplar Fruit also prepared a small towel for Kiki to wipe her sweat. Clothes were prepared, but food couldn't be left out. Poplar Fruit brought 2 milk bottles. One bottle was filled with water, which could be used to replenish Kiki's water in hot weather. The other bottle was filled with milk powder. In addition, Poplar Fruit also brought a small thermos flask with a pot of hot water, which could be mixed with milk powder for Kiki to drink outside. After everything was ready, Poplar Fruit put a beige lace sun hat on Kiki's head, picked up the bag and umbrella, and went out. Standing at the entrance of his alma mater, Poplar Fruit sighed. After graduation, he had been busy with work. Although they were in the same city, he hadn't been back for almost a year. Higashiyama University, fake name, didn't seem to have changed much. The south gate was still the same. The quaint bricks and tiles gave off a steady atmosphere. However, the group of people entering and leaving the school gate had changed. Walking through the south gate, it was the main axis of Higashiyama University, which ran through the entire campus from north to south. Walking out of the north gate's arch, one could see the mighty Pearl River. Poplar Fruit strolled along the main axis of the campus. Higashiyama University's south campus was also an old campus, with a history of more than 100 years. It was located in the central city of Yangcheng. Although it covered a large area, it was a mixture of modern buildings and ancient buildings from the late Qing dynasty, making it feel a little crowded. The main road was a little narrow, and on both sides of it were very old trees that reached into the clouds. The summer sun could only shine through the layers of leaves, sprinkling mottled. There were always a few old buildings with red walls and green tiles hidden in the bushes nearby. Some seemed to be so dilapidated that no one cared about them, while others had been renovated into new teaching buildings. They looked the same from the outside, but when you walked in, It was a completely different world. Walking along the central axis, one could see a neatly trimmed lawn. In the middle of the lawn, there was a flower bed with Higashiyama University's motto and emblem. The motto was fixed by several steel pillars in 5 rows. Erudite, inquisitive, cautious, discernible, faithful. If one looked carefully, one would notice that the left side of the word discernible was horizontal. It was said that Mr. Sun Won, the father of the nation, wanted the students of Higashiyama University to open their eyes and see the world. After passing through the small auditorium, there was an even wider lawn in front. This was the place where the students gathered to take their graduation photos after the graduation ceremony. However, today wasn't the day of the graduation ceremony. Duan Xueqing's graduation photos naturally wouldn't be taken here. Behind the lawn, there was a small slope. On the small slope, there was a bronze statue of Mr. Sun Won and a small pavilion. The pavilion was called Xingting Pavilion, and there was a big stupid clock in the middle. It was also an ancient building with nearly 100 years of history. It was built to commemorate several teachers and students who died in the Shaky Massacre in the 1920s. The sun shone brightly on this grassland, and the lush crowns of the 2 banyan trees formed a dense shade. Bright and bright, it became a place for photography enthusiasts to show off their skills. If the weather was a little warmer in the afternoon, there would be many old people playing with children. Cats and dogs with docile personalities would also be brought by their families. They would chase and play on the lawn. Only when one saw such a harmonious and warm scene, one would understand the meaning of the word happy. Now, there was a couple taking their wedding photos on the lawn. Poplar Fruit smiled as he looked at their sweet appearance. He remembered a piece of news that had been spreading on the internet recently. Higashiyama University's campus was simple and beautiful. It had become the first choice for many newlyweds to take their wedding photos. In order to limit the influx of wedding companies, the university issued a rule. Except for Eastern University's alumni, outsiders who wanted to take their wedding photos must pay a fee of 3,000 yuan. Therefore, many onlookers of Eastern University forwarded this Weibo post and jokingly said, "Marriage saves me 3,000 yuan," or "Marriage saves me 3,000 yuan." Although the 3,000 yuan might not really make the single men and women of Eastern University popular, this rule of Higashiyama University did make the students of Eastern University feel a real sense of belonging. Even if they left the school, their alma mater would never reject their children. Who knew if the couple on the lawn were Eastern University's alumni? Poplar Fruit smiled as he turned right to the path on the right. This path led to Higashiyama University's dormitory area. The road to Higashiyama University's south campus was very narrow. This path could only accommodate 2 cars. Along the winding path, there were a few red brick houses with unknown names in the bushes beside it, giving people a heavy sense of history. If it weren't for the various stadiums, badminton courts, and basketball courts that could be seen, it would really make people feel as if they had traveled back in time to the Republic of China. The number of students here began to increase. Some of them excitedly stepped on their brand new bicycles and passed by Poplar Fruit in a flash. Some of them carried their backpacks and books and hurriedly walked. They were probably rushing to class. Poplar Fruit raised his hand and looked at his watch. It was indeed time for class. A few girls boldly looked at the tall and straight Poplar Fruit and the child in his arms. They laughed and whispered, not knowing which of their companions they were teasing. From the small path to the lakeside of the East Lake, camphor trees, redbud, and king coconut trees surrounded the path, completely covering the winding white path by the lakeside. Walking on the path, perhaps in the next step, one would be pleasantly surprised to find a smooth stone bench in the bushes. There were only 2 newly fallen leaves on it. It was clean. It wasn't hard to imagine that there might be a diligent student reading on this stone bench. Perhaps the residual warmth on it hadn't completely dissipated. The lotus flowers in the lake were about to bloom. The dark green lotus leaves were like an inverted umbrella, densely covering the lake water. The pink flower bud in the middle opened a small mouth. After a while, the blooming lotus flowers here would be so beautiful that it would intoxicate people. There was a slim and graceful girl by the lake. She wore a pink-blue dress. The sleeves of the dress couldn't cover her slender lotus arms. Reflecting the starry sun, her slightly wheat-colored skin revealed a healthy glow. Her beautiful hair just reached her shoulders, but the hair floating in the wind seemed to have a faint fragrance in the air. Poplar Fruit was a little absent-minded. It was as if he had returned to that spring 2 years ago. At that time, he and Lu Yunran sat side by side on the stone bench, chatting sweetly. Suddenly, Lu Yunran stood up with a smile. She walked to the lake and opened her arms. She looked intoxicated, as if she wanted to embrace the sparkling spring water in front of her. Poplar Fruit's heart moved. He stood up and walked forward. Holding his girlfriend's willowy waist with both hands, he pulled her into his embrace from behind. At that moment, both of their hearts were filled with happiness. At that moment, Poplar Fruit only wanted to be together forever. At that moment, the fragrance of Lu Yunran's hair seemed to linger in his nose. That moment had long become a memory that could only be recalled. The girl in front of him was carrying a large camera bag. She was holding a DSLR camera and taking photos happily. Poplar Fruit was observing her. He stopped in his tracks. He didn't notice that the girl suddenly put down the DSLR camera and turned around. When she raised her head, their eyes met. She had a goose-egg-shaped face, white teeth, red lips, and a jade-like nose. Her eyes sparkled like stars, and her eyebrows were slender like willow leaves. She had a soul-stirring beauty without any makeup. Even the lotus flowers in the East Lake behind her couldn't be compared to her. If the scene in front of him was a painting, then it must be this girl who decorated the midsummer. So beautiful. Poplar Fruit couldn't help but praise in his heart. The hair on the girl's forehead was wet with sweat. It curled and stuck to her delicate skin. It looked very charming. Poplar Fruit was a little embarrassed that his peeping was discovered. He put his left hand on his daughter's small shoulder and scratched his head with his right hand. He looked embarrassed. The girl's bright eyes turned. She giggled and said, "Uncle, does the child's mother know that you like to look at beautiful girls so much? What a mischievous girl." Poplar Fruit was deflated. He didn't know how to answer. "Uncle, although you are so handsome, if you look at me like this, I will blush." The girl finally learned a little Taiwanese accent. After she said that, she covered her mouth and laughed. Poplar Fruit was also infected by her laughter. The trace of sadness in his eyes was replaced by a smile. However, Poplar Fruit was a little embarrassed by her calling him uncle. How old was he? How could he go up a generation so quickly? He cupped his hands and begged for mercy with a smile. "Please let me go. I'm just in my early 20s. Uncle, can't you bear this? You're not young, right? You're just in your early 20s? The girl stretched out 2 slender fingers and said with a look of disbelief, "How many are you in your early 20s? 7, 8, or 10? I'm not that old," Poplar Fruit said with grievance. "I just graduated from here last year. I'm only 23 years old this year. Right? I'm not much older than you, right?" "Humph. Older is older. You're an uncle, a strange uncle." The girl raised her nose and said unreasonably. Poplar Fruit was helpless. He didn't want to be entangled in this issue. The girl rolled her eyes. She leaned over and tapped Poplar Fruit's arm and said, "Uncle, you graduated from Eastern University. You must know where Yongfang Hall is, right?" Poplar Fruit's nose moved. He seemed to smell the fragrance of jasmine. The girl saw it and muttered, "Strange uncle." She took 2 steps back. "Well, I know," Poplar Fruit said. He rubbed his nose awkwardly. "Then can you point it out to me?" The girl looked at Poplar Fruit with hope. "You want to go there?" Poplar Fruit said with a frown. "It's a little far." The girl said in a low voice, "I heard that Yongfang Hall has a lot of strange legends. The number of stairs there is different during the day and at night." Then her voice suddenly rose a few pitches. She happily said, "It's such a fun place. Of course I want to see it." Poplar Fruit looked at her gloomily. Just a moment ago, she was like a fairy who came out of a painting. Now she had become a curious little witch. He was really deceived by her gentle and quiet appearance. "Those are all rumors. They can't be trusted. They have been refuted a long time ago." Poplar Fruit shook his head. "If you want to see it, I'll take you to see it." The girl made an exaggerated look of fear. She looked at him with a strange face and said, "Strange uncle, Don't tell me you want to kidnap me to see the goldfish. Chapter 40. Poplar Fruit's forehead hung a few thick black lines. He said angrily, "If it weren't for the fact that the Eastern University campus is too difficult to find, I wouldn't have brought you there." Seeing that she didn't believe him, Poplar Fruit explained, "You have to go this way, turn right, walk along Kangle Road to the small auditorium, then turn left, walk along the path to the intersection, then turn right, then go straight, and turn right at the first intersection." Okay, it's quite messy. The girl in the long dress was dizzy. She covered her head and said, "Strange uncle, please help me lead the way, okay?" Poplar Fruit's face showed a victorious smile, but he quickly covered it up. It wouldn't be good if she saw it. Yangwa decided to help her to the end. Seeing that it was not time for the photo shoot yet, she took her back the way they came. On the way, the girl in the long dress was like a bird that had been locked in a cage for a long time, chattering nonstop. From time to time, she pulled Poplar Fruit and Kiki to take photos together. Poplar Fruit discussed with her, "Hey, can you not call me strange uncle?" The girl walked backward in front of Poplar Fruit with her hands behind her back. She looked into his eyes and said with a smile, "No, you are a strange uncle. I'll call you strange uncle, hee hee." Poplar Fruit had no choice but to take a step back and said, "Then why don't you remove the word strange? People on the road heard it and thought I did something to you." The girl looked at Poplar Fruit and rolled her eyes. She touched her chin and said, "It's not that you can't, but..." She dragged the last syllable. "But what?" Poplar Fruit asked. "But you have to let me hold the baby." The girl laughed. No, Kiki is too small. You can't hold her." Poplar Fruit shook his head decisively. "How do you know I can't?" The girl said angrily, "My brother let me carry his child as soon as he was born. I even helped take care of their child after school." Poplar Fruit saw that she insisted on hugging him, so he came up with a plan and said, "Well, I'll stand here and don't move. If you can make Kiki want to be hugged by you, then I have no objection. All right, it's up to her to decide whether she can or not." The girl placed her hands on her waist and said confidently, "No problem. Weird uncle, don't go back on your word." Poplar Fruit nodded and laughed in his heart. Kiki had always only recognized her father. No one had ever made her take the initiative to ask for a hug. The girl put the SLR back into the camera bag, then put it behind her, clapped her hands, and walked to Poplar Fruit. "The baby is so cute." She looked at Kiki's little face and stretched out her smooth arms. She smiled and said, "Baby, can I hug you?" The girl's breath smelled like orchids, and Poplar Fruit, who was far away from her, felt a delicate fragrance enter his nose. He looked down at the girl who was close to him. The powder blue dress wasn't fancy, but it was simple and elegant. Because of her height, Poplar Fruit could observe her hair from the top of her head. It was black and soft, just like the shampoo commercials on TV. Her hair was clear, smooth and shiny, without any split ends. Although it only reached her shoulders, it still made people's hearts beat faster. What was he thinking? Poplar Fruit shook his head and realized that he was thinking too much. When he came back to his senses, Poplar Fruit realized that under the gentle guidance of the girl, who looked like a little white flower in front of him, Kiki, who was sitting quietly in her father's arms and enjoying the scenery, had also turned her attention to her. Kiki's expression became a little restless. In the end, she burst into a smile and stretched out her little arms, wanting to lean on the girl in the long dress. "No way. This doesn't make sense." For the first time in history, Kiki stretched out her hands to an outsider. Poplar Fruit realized that his plan had failed. Frustrated, Poplar Fruit untied the straps and carefully handed Kiki into the arms of the girl in the long dress. The girl in the long dress didn't lie. She really knew how to hold a baby. Poplar Fruit watched from the side and was relieved. The girl in the long dress smiled brightly, not because she had won against Poplar Fruit, but because she was happy from the bottom of her heart. It looked like a mother's happy smile when holding a child. Chi-Chi also giggled. She laid on the girl's slightly bulging chest, her right hand pressing on the curvaceous and enchanting buttocks, making Yangwa a little jealous. "Kiki baby, is your name Kiki?" The girl rubbed her face against Kiki's little face and looked into her eyes. Of course, Chi-Chi didn't understand. She kept saying strange syllables. As her father, Yanghua took on the responsibility of translating. He said, yes, her name is Chi-Chi. Her full name is Yang Luoqi. The Luo next to the Wang character, and the Chi next to the Wang character. Kiki, your name is so beautiful. Sister is Fang Bebe, you can call Sister Bebe. The girl laughed. However, Kiki just waved her little arms excitedly and continued to babble. So her name is Fang Bebe. Fang Bebe leaned over to Kiki's little face and kissed it. Then, she turned her face to Kiki and said, Kiki, give sister a kiss too. Poplar Fruit was about to say that Kiki didn't know how to kiss, but he was shocked to see Kiki's mouth move over. Although the action was a little irregular and couldn't be considered a real kiss, it was still a light touch on Fang Bebe's face. Poplar Fruit felt like he was going crazy. Was this still his precious daughter, Kiki? Her first kiss was given to a completely unfamiliar girl. Poplar Fruit's heart was crying. Why didn't she kiss him back even though he kissed her so many times? Fang Bebe also didn't expect Kiki to be so obedient. She was pleasantly surprised when she was kissed. She leaned her head against Kiki and smiled, revealing 2 shallow dimples at the corner of her mouth. The beauty's smile was like a flower. Poplar Fruit was stunned again. Fang Bebe turned her body, her butt facing Poplar Fruit, and said, Uncle, quickly take a picture of me and Kiki with my DSLR. The satin skirt wrapped around her waist, forming a beautiful arc. She finally had a conscience, and didn't call him a strange uncle anymore. Poplar Fruit resisted the urge to slap her, opened the camera bag on her perky butt, and took out the DSLR. Although he didn't really have a DSLR, Poplar Fruit used to play with his classmates, so he opened the camera cover with ease and turned on the DSLR. He closed his left eye, put his right eye on the viewfinder, and adjusted the focus of the lens with his left hand. Poplar Fruit first took a picture to adjust the ISO and aperture. Then he faced Kiki and Fang Bebe, ready to take a picture. Fang Bebe and Kiki were having a lot of fun. They kissed each other, and their faces were smeared with each other's saliva. Poplar Fruit caught the moment Kiki kissed her, and pressed the shutter. Looking at the effect on the screen, Poplar Fruit was a little absent-minded. In the picture, Kiki's eyes were like crescent moons, and her mouth was pressed against Fang Bebe's beautiful cheek. Fang Bebe was also smiling sweetly. The hair near her ear was not tied up, and a few strands of hair were wet and stuck to the place where Kiki had kissed before. What could be more brilliant than the smiles of these 2 girls? Even the red flowers and green willows behind her paled in comparison. Poplar Fruit not only helped to take the picture, but also helped to hold the umbrella to shield the 2 girls from the sun. He walked and asked, Fang Bebe, you are not a student of Eastern University, right? He guess? Fang Bebe did not raise her head, and only focused on teasing Kiki. Definitely not, otherwise, how could you not know where Yongfang Tang is? Who said so? Eastern University has 4 campuses. Those who attend classes in other campuses may not know. Fang Bebe said. Poplar Fruit looked at her in surprise. She knew so much about Eastern University. She was not simple. However, Poplar Fruit was not scared. He shook his head and said, No, you don't have the feeling of Eastern University. You are dressed like a tourist. You must not be a student of Eastern University. Haha, you only guessed half right. I am not a student of Eastern University now, but I am already a student of Eastern University. Are you a graduate student who just got admitted this year? Poplar Fruit asked in surprise. He thought about it carefully, shook his head and said, No, you can't be a graduate student. You are too young. Just by listening to you, I can tell that you are from the 90s. Poplar Fruit suddenly remembered that Fang Bebe said that she would help her brother and sister-in-law take care of the children after school. How could a college student say after school? Poplar Fruit suddenly realized and said, You are a high school student. No, you are a high school student who was admitted in advance. Right. Only a high school student who was admitted in advance by independent enrollment would be sure that they entered Eastern University at this time. Fang Bebe looked back at Poplar Fruit in surprise and said, Uncle, how did you guess? Poplar Fruit explained, The college entrance examination has just ended. You are so confident that you have been admitted to Eastern University. Either you are a super scholar who completely ignored the college entrance examination, or you have been admitted by independent enrollment. But it is unlikely that a super scholar would choose Eastern University as their first choice, so it can only be the latter. Am I right? Fang Beibei, little junior sister. Well, you found out. Don't call me little junior sister, weird uncle. Fang Beibei pouted and buried her head to play with Kiki. Happy times are always a little short. After a few turns, the path came to an end. Yongfang Hall also appeared in front of them. It was time to say goodbye. Of course, the ones who had to say goodbye were Kiki and Fang Beibei. Poplar fruit continued to be ignored. Fang Beibei reluctantly hugged Kiki and said something. Poplar fruit scratched his head and stood aside. He didn't know what to say. He felt that his heart was somewhat reluctant. At this time, the phone in his trouser pocket suddenly vibrated. Poplar fruit quickly took it out. It was Duan Xueqing. Hello, Xueqing. Brother Yang, where are you? Duan Xueqing said briskly. I'll be there soon. I'm going to your dormitory now. Poplar fruit said. You don't have to come to my dormitory. Duan Xueqing quickly said. We are at the big clock tower. Brother Yang, you can just come here directly. Okay, wait for me for 10 minutes. I'll be there soon. Well, see you later. Bye. After putting down the phone, Poplar fruit scratched his head and said to Fang Beibei, who was still reluctant to part. I have to go now. Fang Beibei reluctantly returned Kiki to Poplar fruit, and then took the DSLR from Poplar fruit's hands. Poplar fruit tied Kiki back to the strap in front of his chest. His mouth moved as if he wanted to say something, but he didn't say it. In the end, he just waved goodbye to Fang Beibei. Poplar fruit walked a few meters away. Fang Beibei suddenly shouted from behind with her hands in the shape of a trumpet. Uncle, thank you. Poplar fruit turned back and waved at her. Then, he continued to walk in the direction of the big clock tower. Kiki looked up at her father and patted her father's chest with her hand. It seemed that she wanted to express something. Poplar fruit touched her head. His voice was a little low. He said softly, There's no chance. Kiki, we are not on the same path as Sister Beibei after all. We probably won't meet again in the future. Just treat it as a beautiful encounter. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.